Racuna tells him the next class is in another room as she holds her notebooks. Walking down the hall, she asks if he was up all night gaming again. The protagonist thinks about how she's been looking out for him for a long time. A memory flashes back, showing the two of them as kids in a dark, dirty alley. Back then, the little girl reached out her hand with a kind look to help him. With that, he remembers that she saved him when he was a complete disaster. Back in the present, the two continue walking together through the high school hallways. Stopping by a window, the girl points outside, getting her friend's attention. The boy is completely mesmerized by the beautiful view of the illuminated city. Watching the rainbow, he reflects that he only has this peaceful life thanks to her. On the other hand, the guy knows there's a very different reality hidden from sight. On the hidden side of this piece, a dark alley is home to several strange creatures. There are countless aberrations that threaten the daily lives of normal people. When night falls, our MC gets ready to take action in the Shadow Realm. Walking alone down a deserted street, he's soon surrounded by the creatures. Standing before the monsters, he reveals his name isn't actually Rudo. The aberrations start to roar fiercely, ready to attack the boy. Unleashing a dark aura, he states his real name is Salt, and he's a doppelganger. Using his power to freely manipulate shadows, he slices through the enemies around him. One of the monsters tries to flee, but he warns the creature it won't get away. With a swift move, the shadow attack cuts the aberration in half. Seizing the opening, Salt ends the fight by landing a final blow on the monster. After the fight, the protagonist notices some strange movement nearby. He's surprised to see that another enemy was about to attack. Suddenly, a girl leaps from the top of a building, wielding a sharp blade. Giving the creature no chance, she lands a direct hit on the flying monster. As soon as she lands in style, Salt recognizes the girl and calls out to Hakua. He thanks her for the help, but she warns him not to let his guard down for a second. The boy explains that Hakua is part of a mysterious organization. Walking together, she comments that the two of them work much better fighting as a team. Sometimes, they would spend time just sitting together while she listened to his problems. Since she also fought every day, the warrior was always there to help him when he needed it. Mustering her courage, Hakua invites her friend to go out and grab a bite to eat sometime. Excited by the idea, Salt happily agrees that sounds awesome. As they continue walking through the alley, the two start deciding what they'll eat. The protagonist reflects on how important Hakua has become on his journey. At the same time, he also thinks about his unbreakable bond with the kind Racuna. Looking at the flowering trees at night, he concludes that they are both precious people to him. However, a heavy worry takes over the young man's thoughts. Looking down at the city from above, he feels that something dark is approaching them all. Just then, a mysterious man in glasses appears, planning the worst possible future. One day, a sinister energy struck both girls without any warning. Unfortunately, both were marked by something known as the Curse of Demise. Without quick intervention, his friends would perish, and there was only one way to save them. The terrible solution required one of the girls to be taken out on that rainy night. Forced to make this impossible decision, Salt holds his weapon, extremely shaken. With no way to escape this cruel fate, he gathers the courage to do what needs to be done. The protagonist suffers in silence, feeling an unbearable pain in his chest over the situation. Before the final blow, the chosen girl appears calm and thanks him for everything. Blood splatters across the scene as he calls himself the worst person in the world. Meanwhile, in the day-to-day of the big city, most people live without knowing the truth. Far from human eyes, bizarre creatures inhabit the filthy alleys of this world. Non-human entities walk freely through the streets, confirming the existence of aberrations. In the past, young Salt wandered alone through the most dangerous corners of the underworld. He lived in the Lost Area, a city of aberrations completely isolated from society. The place was a complete mess, full of creatures wandering around with no purpose. Clutching his own stomach, the little boy feels a terrible hunger and tries to survive. In the middle of the trash, he finds a plate with leftover food thrown away. The boy gets incredibly excited to see he's finally found something to eat. Quickly, he holds the dirty tray as if it were the greatest treasure in the world. But suddenly, he's startled by a noise coming from right above him. A bunch of trash bags comes tumbling down right on the poor, hungry boy's head. Two scary aberrations stare down at the boy from above, calling him a sewer rat. Covered in filth, Salt listens to the big guys mock his awful smell. The food he had found ends up completely destroyed and mixed into the ground. One of the monsters grabs the boy by the collar and tells him to go hunt a human for food. Unable to defend himself, the boy can only listen to the bully's malicious laughter. One of the monsters yells that the boy is just a useless doppelganger, only capable of cursing someone who shares his face. Having no real skills, Little Salt considers himself a true outcast and a failure, even among aberrations. Next, he takes a hard punch to the face and groans in pain, unable to fight back. Another creature lands a heavy blow on the boy while laughing at his miserable situation. And so, the poor boy ends up getting beaten by a group of monsters in a dark alley. Suddenly, a much more menacing aberration appears, saying that territory belongs to him, scaring off the bullies. Using a dark power, the owner of the turf attacks and slices up the aggressors without a shred of mercy. Taking advantage of the confusion, the boy stays on the ground, taking deep breaths and trying to recover from the shock. Fearing for his own life, he gets up and starts running as fast as he can to get out of there. As he flees through the streets, he remembers that his only ability as a doppelganger is to curse people. When he finds his original human counterpart, that human ends up cursed and perishes, and he watches the real Ryudo collapsed on the ground. Even if he has no intention of causing harm, the curse happens anyway, making it a completely tragic power. However, the dark monster from before quickly catches up to the protagonist and prepares a merciless attack from behind. He senses the approach and looks back in terror as the lethal blow hits him square on. Feeling an unbearable pain in his body, the boy screams in desperation, begging the creature to stop. Suffering from the brutal attack, the young doppelganger screams in agony as he's torn apart. Just as he was about to lose his life, he's left lying on the ground, illuminated by a mysterious light. Just then, soft footsteps begin to echo through the silent alley, getting closer to him. An unknown little girl appears against the light and calls the boy by the name Ruto. Very worried, the girl asks if it's really him lying there. Standing in front of the injured boy, he just reacts with confusion, wanting to know who she is. The girl mentions she thought she'd never see him again, as people said he'd vanished in the river, questioning if he didn't remember anything. Noticing the boy's blank stare, she simply accepts the situation with a gentle expression. In reality, he just didn't know anything about that. But the girl is already kneeling to comfort him. Reaching out her hand with great affection, she says she's so happy he's safe after all this time. He hesitates, feeling the weight of not being the real Rudo, but just a sewer rat taking over another life. The loud noise of an alarm clock ringing suddenly cuts off the memory, marking the start of the morning. Waking up with a jolt, the protagonist sits up in bed, panting, and realizes it was all just a bad dream from the past. Now calmer, he goes to the kitchen and finds his family gathered, eating breakfast. Eating a piece of toast peacefully, he reflects, trying to believe that 3 years have passed since that fateful day. Walking out the front gate, the young man tells his family he's heading off to school. Walking down the sidewalk, he lets out a long yawn, trying to shake off the morning sleepiness. Looking at the green scenery around the river, he thinks about how this is another very peaceful day in the city. Suddenly, someone lightly touches the back of his neck, getting his attention by surprise. Rakuno appears, saying good morning with a lot of excitement, and he immediately recognizes his friend's voice. She joins the boy on his way with a super friendly and close demeanor. Walking together, the girl remembers that summer vacation starts tomorrow and wants to know if he has any plans. While walking and looking at the ground, the protagonist thought this peace would last forever. The girl then suggests the two of them go out and do something together, leaving him a bit flustered for an answer. This makes him think about the day he swapped places with the real Ryudo 3 years ago. A quick memory again shows the little girl reaching out her hand to save him in the filthy alley. After rescuing him, she guided Little Salt straight to her house, safely. Opening the door in a welcoming way, the girl introduced the lost boy to his new home. Right after, a woman hugged him, crying with relief, believing he was her missing son. Welcomed by that loving family, he was finally able to eat a warm, delicious meal for the first time. Reflecting on the past, the boy admits to himself that he's been living a huge lie since that day. Back in the present, he thinks that he'd even like to go to a specific place with her. But telling the truth now would only make Rakuna sad. Accepting his fate, he concludes that if he keeps playing the part of Ryuto, no one will get hurt in the process. Just then, the girl asks if he remembers what she said at the summer festival, and our guy just remembers he doesn't want to go back to living on the streets. At least, that's what he thought was going to happen. While his friend gets slightly shy, waiting for his answer. But that peaceful day quickly turned into his worst nightmare, when they notice a strange structure emerging from the ground. A violent purple energy erupts in the middle of the street, scaring everyone around. The boy's eyes widen, completely in shock at the unforeseen appearance. A giant portal in the shape of a torii gate materializes, tearing through the air, leaving the crowd totally lost. Not understanding the danger, Raccoona asks what the heck that glowing thing is. From the portal's shadows, terrifying monsters leap out mercilessly and start slicing through the civilians. Panic takes over the street with people screaming in pure terror as they try to save their lives. Horrifying creatures emerge from nowhere, causing widespread panic in the middle of the square. Amidst the absolute chaos, a monster shaped like a floating skeleton quickly exits from within the rift. The flying aberration focuses its attention and charges full speed toward the defenseless students. Faced with that frightening scene, poor Raccoona is completely paralyzed with fear, unable to move. In a quick survival reflex, the protagonist grabs her hand tightly. Screaming at the top of his lungs, he tells his friend to run as the skeleton monster charges directly at them. The aberration's giant hand almost smashes the two of them on the asphalt. The destructive attack slams violently into the ground right behind them, kicking up dust and debris. On all sides, the savage creatures continue to attack people indiscriminately, creating a bloodbath. The girl tries to run as fast as she can, struggling to keep up with the desperate pace of their escape. The guy analyzes the situation in shock, realizing he'd never seen aberrations of this bizarre type before. In the middle of the rush, Raccoona trips and falls to her knees, making the boy stop immediately to call out to her. Taking advantage of her being down, a spider-like aberration leaps, ready to finish the girl off. The creature opens its monstrous jaw, revealing sharp teeth for the lethal blow. Lying on the cold ground, the girl looks at the beast, feeling her end approaching inevitably. But the protagonist bravely throws himself in front of her, pushing the monster away with his shadow ability. As a consequence of this heroic act, the sharp claws pierce the boy's chest, sending blood everywhere. Seeing her best friend impaled in front of her, Raccoona screams his name in shock. Suffering a brutal attack, Ryudo screams in pure agony as the monster mercilessly tears at his back. Raccoona watches the terrible scene, completely horrified and crying heavily. Even while feeling unbearable pain, the boy bravely resists and tries to stay conscious. He remembers his friend's kindness in the past and promises himself that this time, he'll be the one to protect her. With that, the protagonist unleashes his dark energy and launches a powerful attack to push the beast away. The violent impact throws the aberration back, causing major damage to the creature. Feeling the weight of his injury, the young man holds his own bloody shoulder in great pain. Quickly, he tells her this is their chance and starts running, pulling the girl along. As they flee desperately, she worries about his bleeding, but he assures her he can handle it. Raccoona insists the situation is terrible and suggests they enter a nearby building to hide. Hiding in an alley, the two wait in silence as another bizarre creature passes by on the street. The long-haired monster walks slowly, looking for victims in the darkness. Now inside a dark room, Ryudo sits on the floor, exhausted, and says he'll take care of his own wound. Seeing the situation worsen, his friend panics, not knowing how to stop the intense bleeding. Determined to help, she decides to search the area to try and find anything useful. Before she moves away, the guy asks her to wait a moment. Feeling very guilty about the whole situation, he apologizes for causing so much trouble. The girl tries to comfort him and reminds him they only made it this far alive because of him. She asks her friend not to worry about it and to try and stay calm. But suddenly the wall of the place explodes violently, sending pieces of concrete flying everywhere. The boy turns around, startled, trying to figure out where that sudden impact came from. Desperate over the destruction, he screams Raccoona's name at the top of his lungs. That terrifying long-haired monster invades their hiding spot with the clear intention of taking out the human. The aberration advances menacingly through the dark hall, completely ignoring the protagonist's presence. Amidst the debris, the poor girl appears, fallen on the ground, completely injured. Noticing his friend in danger, Ryudo runs desperately toward her. However, the creature is much faster and lands a devastating blow to push the young man away. The brutal impact throws the boy back, making him crash hard against the tables in the hall. In great pain, he tries to get up while trying to understand what just happened. The monster lifts the girl into the air by her leg and announces it will fulfill the contract to end her life. Lying on the floor, the protagonist reaches out his hand in a useless effort to try and save her. Very weak, his friend murmurs his name one last time, her voice failing. Ryudo is paralyzed with fear, watching the scene, unable to react in time. Projecting a sense of peace even while covered in blood, she just asks him to keep on living. This farewell sends the boy into an absolute state of shock. In a cruel instant, the monster mercilessly crushes the girl, sending blood all over the room. The beast lets out a terrifying roar, celebrating the demise of its helpless victim. Completely broken inside, the young man remains kneeling, murmuring the name of his protector. A warm memory of her saying everything would be okay invades his mind. The monster then discards the lifeless body like trash, while the boy keeps calling for her in disbelief. He again remembers Rakuna's joy as she tried to comfort him in the past. Just then, the bloody body hits the cold floor of the place with a violent thud. The pain of loss awakens an uncontrollable fury, and the protagonist's eyes glow with a sinister energy. A dark and violent aura begins to leak from his body, cracking the entire floor around him. Consumed by a deep hatred, he bellows with all his might that he will never forgive that creature. Covered in murderous shadows, the young man declares he will take the aberration down right then and there. In response, the creature shows pure confidence, underestimating the boy's threat. Without wasting time, the protagonist charges forward at an absurd speed, tearing through the air with his power. With his mind dominated by bloodlust, he repeats his promise of demise. The monster raises its blood-stained hand and prepares to take the attack head-on. The aberration maintains its arrogant posture, thinking it has the upper hand in the fight. But Ryudo focuses all his dark energy directly on the target. In a swift motion, he unleashes a gigantic upward slash of shadows. The absurd speed of the attack leaves the beast completely surprised and unable to react. Annoyed, the monster curses the boy and tries to counter with a crushing punch. The young man dodges the deadly blow with impressive agility, becoming just a blur. The creature's fist hits the empty floor, causing massive destruction in the area. The aberration looks for its target, not understanding where the enemy went. Unnoticed, the protagonist reappears, running quickly up the monster's giant arm. By the time the creature notices, the guy is already positioned high in the air, ready for the final attack. Summoning gigantic shadow claws, the boy asks what the enemy was laughing about. He extends his hand, channeling all his fury into a single destructive point. Right after, pillars of dark energy crash down, crushing the creature. Consumed by the darkness, the aberration screams in agony as it suffers massive damage. Badly injured, the monster falls to its knees, trying to withstand the pain of the impact. Giving it no chance to defend, the protagonist dives from the air to finish the job. Taken over by pure hatred, he focuses all his power on the decisive blow. The guy slices the creature in half with a lethal attack and announces that it all ends here. The brutal blow completely destroys the enemy in a festival of gushing blood. With that, the monster's remains collapse, scattered across the street floor. Exhausted after the intense fight, the boy stares at his own hand, still glowing with energy. He's confused, trying to understand what kind of bizarre power he just used. But the adrenaline wears off, and he despairs as he remembers his friend's terrible situation. Slowly, he walks through the debris and approaches the body lying in the middle of the room. Standing before the sad reality, he looks at the girl, completely devastated by the loss. Remembering the past, the girl asks if he recalls what she said at the summer festival a long time ago. Calling her friend affectionately, Rudo, she maintains a serene expression even on the brink of her end. Completely devastated, the boy cries, hugging his friend's lifeless body in the middle of the destroyed room. The tragic sight of blood spreading across the floor confirms that the young woman is no longer alive. Full of guilt, Rudo apologizes, whispering his companion's name with a choked voice. He breaks down in tears, deeply regretting that he couldn't protect her as he had promised. Caressing her face, the young man reflects that he only stayed alive all this time thanks to her. With that, he confesses through his tears that he spent all this time lying to his friend. Overcome with frustration, he clenches his glowing fist, cursing himself for being a complete idiot. Meanwhile, outside the building, aberrations continue to cause chaos throughout the city. Faced with the roar of a giant monster, the boy declares he won't forgive any of this. Unleashing his dark energy, he extends his hand toward the creatures that ruined his peaceful life. Standing up, the protagonist directly blames the aberrations for everything that happened to Rakuna and to him. Before heading into the fight, he looks at his fallen friend and asks her to wait just a little while for him. With a deadly hatred in his eyes, the young man swears he will slaughter every single one of those aberrations without exception. Trying to stay focused, Ryudo concludes that he first needs to check the situation outside. But suddenly, a female scream of pure desperation cuts through the silence, grabbing his attention. On the street, a blindfolded girl is captured by the shadows of skeleton-like aberrations. The protagonist's eyes widen immediately as he realizes the danger the stranger is in. Trapped by the creatures, the young woman groans in pain, trying to break free from the dark bonds. Without hesitation, the guy activates his violent power to intervene in the situation. With a quick motion, he charges forward, slicing the dark tentacles that held the victim. Taking advantage of the opening, the strikes destroy the bonds, and the girl starts to fall to the ground. Being agile, Ryudo catches the young woman in his arms before she hits the asphalt hard. The girl is a bit stunned, trying to understand who just saved her from that attack. The boy asks if she's okay, and the girl agrees, stuttering a bit from the shock. Now safely on the ground, she thanks him for his help against the skeletal creatures. Staring at the guy's face, she hesitates for a moment, seeming to recognize something familiar about him. The two stand still in the middle of the destroyed street in a brief moment of tense silence. Just then, the protagonist's expression quickly changes as he notices something urgent approaching. Sensing the danger, Ryudo warns that they need to fall back right now, and the girl hurriedly agrees. As they start running together through the alley, the young woman tries to ask what's happening. During their escape, she directly questions if the guy is actually a doppelganger. The boy looks back, completely caught off guard by such a sudden statement. Keeping up the pace, she assures him she knows exactly what he really is. With that, the mysterious girl reveals that she shares the same nature as him. Hearing that, the protagonist puts the pieces together, trying to understand the meaning of the revelation. Noticing her lack of manners, the girl finally introduces herself as Hakuwa and asks for his name. Still processing if she's really a doppelganger, he tries to answer, but Hakuwa cuts him off, warning that her allies are arriving. Taking the lead in the escape, the warrior tells Ryudo to follow her without wasting any more time. Just ahead, an elegant man with dark glasses awaits the two with a very confident posture. Greatly relieved at the sight, Hakuwa assures him that finding this man means there's still hope. Weighing his options, the guy decides that for the moment, the only viable choice is to trust her. However, the warrior's expression changes drastically to pure shock as she looks ahead. A hellish explosion engulfs the area, revealing several bodies on the ground, startling the girl. In desperation, Hakuwa kneels beside one of the bodies, calling out for Mr. Rose. Ryudo watches all the fiery destruction, unable to believe the massacre. Totally frightened, the boy asks his companion what the heck that huge thing is. In the middle of the fire, a dark figure speaks about this rotten world that rejected someone. The man in glasses shows a psychopathic look, clearly enjoying the chaos. Summoning a gigantic horde of aberrations, the enemy promises to drown the entire city in those monsters. Faced with the deadly army, the girl stammers in terror while Ryudo is left speechless. Assessing the threat, Hakuwa comments that she's never seen so many monsters of that type gathered in one place. The skeletal creatures begin to march together as the protagonist questions what kind of madness this is. A destructive energy starts to tear through the night sky, distorting the surrounding buildings. Feeling the danger escalate, the guy wants to know what else is happening now. A gigantic dimensional rift opens right above them, illuminating the street with a purple glow. With the force of the impact, Ryudo raises his arm to protect his friend from the flying debris. Looking at the torn sky, Hakuwa warns that the world is beginning to totally collapse. Not understanding the gravity of the situation, the protagonist asks her to repeat what she just said. Ignoring their conversation, the skeletal monsters charge fiercely against the two youths. Noticing the aberrations falling from above, Ryudo warns that the enemies are attacking with everything they've got. With no time to run, the duo takes a stand and simultaneously defends against the creature's heavy blows. In the midst of the physical clash, Hakuwa desperately tells the boy to be very careful. Returning the concern, he tells the girl to also watch out for the enemy attacks. Showing great agility, the warrior narrowly dodges a lethal claw aimed at her head. Seizing the opening, she counters, landing a precise slash with her blade on the aberration. On the other side, the protagonist manipulates his shadows to fend off the monster's charge. Under heavy pressure from the horde, he declares he won't let himself be defeated in a place like this. Unleashing all his fury, he tries to crush the creature against the asphalt with brutal power. However, the boy's eyes widen in astonishment as he notices the aberration dodged the lethal attack. Emerging from the smoke, the skeletal enemy prepares a super fast counterattack. Unable to dodge, the guy crosses his arms to block the impact and curses in frustration. The absurd weight of the blow pushes the boy back, showing the monster's enormous physical strength. Making matters worse, the skull opens its mouth wide, charging an energy attack right at his face. The lethal energy beam hits Ryudo head on with devastating force in the middle of the street. Taking the full impact head-on, the protagonist bravely tries to resist the enemy's attack. Taking advantage of the creature's distraction, Hakuwa leaps from behind and charges to slice the aberration. After the violent blow, the guy grumbles, very frustrated with his own situation. Completely exhausted and losing a lot of blood, he ends up falling to his knees on the hot asphalt. Just then, the skeletal monsters fire several simultaneous energy attacks straight from the sky. The creatures stare down at their targets, displaying a brutal and focused murderous intent. More dark aberrations continue to emerge swiftly from the skies of the collapsing city. Suddenly, a giant shadow hand smashes Hakua with overwhelming power. The boy watches the scene in agony from the ground, unable to react in time to save his friend. Holding the serious wound on his shoulder, he realizes that not even his power could block the attack. Worried about the warrior's disappearance, Ryudo starts looking for her amidst the thick smoke. Observing the chaotic scene around him, the young man desperately screams his companion's name. But a noise right behind him grabs his attention, cutting through the moment of extreme tension. The girl appears standing on the debris, all beaten up, leaving him relieved that she's safe. Feeling a sharp pain, the young doppelganger suffers greatly, holding her own injured arm. The protagonist approaches, frightened by the wound, and she confirms she can barely stand. Noticing his companion's distant look, he tries to understand what's happening to her. Turning her back to the guy, the warrior states directly that they have no way of winning. With that, the young woman adds a warning that this world is already heading towards its end. Looking at the carnage in the destroyed city, she declares that the place is already completely doomed. Making a dangerous and final decision, the girl murmurs that now it's all or nothing. Suddenly, she leaps back very quickly, leaving the boy completely confused. Determined to try everything, she says she needs to focus on the one chance to change this terrible fate. As the girl runs away, Ryuto extends his hand in a useless effort to stop her. Fearing the worst, the young man tells his friend to flee from the danger as fast as possible. But a giant monster appears right in front and fires a destructive energy beam directly at her. Seeing the unchecked lethal attack approaching, the protagonist screams in pure desperation. Illuminated by the flash of the enemy's power, the guy is paralyzed in shock at the imminent scene. The absurd explosion hits the warrior head-on, spreading destruction all over the street at once. Engulfed by the crushing energy, the warrior suffers greatly from the monster's brutal impact. Completely terrified by his friend's situation, Ryudo bellows her name. He tries to run toward the attack, begging for it to stop immediately. Though badly injured in the air, Hakua asks him to jump into that rift in her place, taking even more damage from the creature. She warns that he needs to reach the other side alive. The monstrous aberration rises, preparing to deliver the final blow to the completely defenseless girl. In a cruel instant, the monster impales the warrior as she tells him to find Crossray in the lost area. Blood splatters everywhere, and the guy continues to run uselessly, pleading, "Please." Already collapsing to the ground, gravely wounded, she asks in a final whisper for him to tell them about all of this. The young woman's weakened hand hits the cold asphalt, confirming her sad, fatal fall. Paralyzed in the middle of the blood-stained street, the boy panics, concluding that none of this makes any sense. Just then, the weight of his own injuries makes him groan in agony in a moment of intense pain. Resuming his desperate run, he thinks that he lost everything the exact moment he thought he had power. Memories of the two fallen girls invade his mind, lamenting that he couldn't protect anyone. In an act of pure survival, he dashes swiftly toward the purple portal, fleeing from the immense skull. Focusing on the fast-moving target, the skeleton fires a violent blast right at the guy's back. Remembering Rakuna's outstretched hand in the past, he questions why he accepted her help. The force of the enemy's attack mercilessly engulfs the boy in the middle of an absurdly bright explosion. But instead of giving up on life there, the protagonist's eye shows a very fierce determination. Breaking through the destructive beam with pure hatred, he begs to be able to save someone, just once. With the last of his body's energy, the young man finally plants his feet firmly on the glowing edge of the dark portal. The invisible power of the dimensional rift pulls the boy with full force into a distorted vortex. Falling into the endless abyss, Rudo screams at the top of his lungs, completely lost in space. Diving headfirst into the dark vacuum, the guy continues to fall rapidly toward the unknown. Focusing on a bright point far in the distance, he reaches out his hand, trying to grasp the saving light. Floating fragments reflect the smiling faces of the friends he lost so tragically. Suddenly, his pained expression changes to pure astonishment as he notices something unexpected nearby. Without any warning, the protagonist abruptly wakes up, sitting at his own school desk. The other students in the room look at him strangely due to the exaggerated reaction of the boy who just woke up. The scenery outside the window changes radically, showing the quiet school under a perfect sunny day. Very confused, the boy analyzes his own hands, noticing up close that there are no injuries. His eyes widen in shock, and he refuses to believe the absurd theory that just crossed his mind. Someone calmly approaches his desk, gently asking what's wrong. The guy looks to the side and murmurs Rakuna's name upon seeing his friend perfectly healthy again. The young woman looks back at the boy with a serene and silent expression, holding her school supplies. Overcome by a crushing emotion, he realizes, relieved and emotional, that she is truly alive. In a sudden, thoughtless impulse, Ryudo shoves his chair back forcefully and quickly gets up from his desk. The boy's abrupt action leaves his friend quite surprised and she backs away, not knowing what he's going to do. Leaping into action, he hugs the girl tightly, confessing that he thought he'd never see her again. Everyone in the classroom stops what they're doing just to watch the awkward scene between the two. A breeze blows through the window as the girl calls his name. Startled, finally snapping him out of his trance. Trembling with pure embarrassment, the protagonist apologizes profusely, trying to use being a deep sleeper as an excuse. Still with her back turned and embarrassed, Rakuna sighs, dryly announcing she's heading to the lab. She hurries out the front door, leaving the young man frozen, trying to explain himself completely unsuccessfully. Walking alone down the hallway, the girl clutches her folder tightly in a mysterious way. Alone in the hallway, the girl holds her supplies, looking quite upset. The school bell rings, announcing the end of classes in the late afternoon. Walking home, Ryudo sighs, worried, thinking that Rakuna hates him now. Standing on the street, he realizes he's gone back 1 year in time, but still doesn't understand anything. Remembering Hakua's demise, he knows he needs to follow her warning and investigate the lost area. The image of the carnage comes to mind, confirming that the disaster will happen again. Looking at the normal people, the boy swears that this time he will protect everyone. With a determined look, he affirms that he will do it using his own power. Soon, the protagonist walks alone into a dark alley in the city. Crossing the dirty tunnel, he enters the dangerous territory of the lost area. Standing before the place, he confesses in shock that he can't believe he's back here again. A memory from 2 years ago shows him walking through these same filthy alleys. Back then, the little boy walked with his head down, looking completely exhausted. The boy barely had the strength to keep walking through that precarious environment. Unable to stay on his feet, the boy trips and ends up falling right onto the ground. On the dirt ground, the young man feels the pain of his own weakness as he tries to get up. Lying in the alley, he remembers that he used to live right here in the lost area. Just then, the boy reveals that his real name has always been Salt. In reality, he was nothing more than the fake Ryudo, living in absolute misery. He considered himself just a filthy beggar trying to survive on the street. Back in the present, the protagonist explains that the aberrations receive food here every week. Walking through the area, he deduces that someone created this system to protect humans. The guy thinks the supply distributor might know something useful, so he approaches the door of the monster's meeting point. Entering the warehouse, the young man is confused to find the place completely empty today. Suddenly, a mocking voice grabs the boy's attention, calling him a rich kid. A suspicious man questions what someone so well dressed is doing in a dump like this. Quite nervous, Ryudo lies that he just got lost and says he's leaving now. But the guy stands up, telling him not to be in a hurry and to hand over everything he has. Using a bizarre power, the man warns that if the kid's gonna curse someone, he'd better be quick about it. Faced with the threat, the protagonist's eyes widen, completely terrified. The enemy transforms into a monstrous mummy and tells the boy to curse his own luck. Backing away in terror, the young man desperately asks the monster to wait a moment. Laughing at the situation, the aberration charges forward, telling him to try not to perish. A violent energy slash cuts through the air right toward the aggressor. Caught off guard by the impact, the monster freezes, not understanding anything. The creature is startled to see that the boy summoned a weapon to defend himself just in time. Holding his dark blade, Ryudo realizes with surprise that he can use his power from that day. Annoyed, the mummy curses the boy for dressing like a normal human and tells him to meet his end. Without wasting time, the monster launches an extremely fast attack with its bandages. Nimbly dodging the blow, the young man realizes he has no choice but to fight. The two leap, and their forces clash violently in the air, causing a huge impact. The aberration retreats and fires several sharp bandages toward its target. Thinking it has the advantage, the enemy shows a malicious smile, calling the guy a brat. However, the protagonist just concentrates a dark and intense aura directly in his own hand. Unleashing all his power, Ryuto attacks, telling the monster not to get cocky. The brutal impact of the dark magic hits the aberration square in the chest. Taking massive damage, the creature is thrown violently far away. Completely defeated, the man returns to his human form and lies on the ground smoking. Walking up to him, the boy reflects that this place is still as dangerous as ever. At that moment, the young man suddenly remembers the main objective that brought him here. Cornering the thug, the guy asks if he knows someone named Raikorozu. The man panics, questioning if he's talking about the leader of Yatagarasu himself. Placing the shadow knife to the enemy's throat, Ryudo realizes he knows who it is. Threatened, the thug sweats coldly and desperately assures him he'll tell him everything he knows. He explains that this organization manages and eliminates aberrations, led by the feared Kurozu. Following the lead, the protagonist walks alone down a dark and gloomy corridor, stopping in front of a heavy metal door. He concludes that he's finally found the hideout. On the other side, a dark-haired man waits in silence, looking quite dangerous. The boy knocks carefully on the iron door and asks aloud if anyone is there. Turning the doorknob slowly, the guy is surprised to find the door was already unlocked. Entering a luxurious room, he's amazed by the environment and announces his arrival. Suddenly, an intimidating presence appears silently right behind the boy. Ryuto reacts with a jolt, immediately drawing his shadow knife as he turns around. Facing the intruder, Commander Raikorozu asks what a doppelganger brat wants with him. Quite intimidated by the leader's posture, the young man just hesitates, not knowing how to respond. The man repeats the insult with a deadly look, making the protagonist stammer nervously. Keeping his weapon raised in a futile attempt at defense, the boy tries to start talking. Without any patience, Kurosu kicks the guy away with absurd speed. The violent impact sends the young man face first onto the checkered floor of the luxurious room. Stepping directly on the intruder's head, the leader immobilizes the target, who lets out a groan of pain. The man states that he has a lot of nerve invading the place and asks if he wants to meet his end right there. Pinned to the floor, the boy confirms his identity and informs him that Hakuwa sent him. Hearing that familiar name, the organization's commander's expression changes, looking surprised. Still under the enemy's boot, Ryudo warns that if things continue like this, a disaster will happen in 1 year. Remembering that horrible massacre with flying monsters, the boy suffers as he recalls the people screaming in desperation. Pressed against the floor, the young man grunts, trying to resist the crushing pain. Without any warning, the commander lands a violent kick that sends the boy flying. Lying on the floor, the protagonist desperately pleads for the man to just listen to what he has to say, but the enemy walks toward him with heavy, firm steps. Facing the injured guy, the leader warns that if he wants to be heard so badly, he'll have to prove his worth. With a cold look, the man points to his own ear and tells the boy to try and touch his earring. The young man is confused, while Kurosu states that he doesn't care what method he uses to do it. The commander directly challenges the guy, telling him to show that awakened power of his. Just then, Ryudo realizes the leader already knows about his ability and concludes he's being tested. Accepting the challenge, the boy starts to get up and says he gets the message. Unleashing his dark energy, he charges forward with a battle cry. The protagonist throws a direct punch, but his opponent dodges with great ease. Trying again, he throws another quick blow that ends up cutting only air. The guy starts to unleash a violent sequence of attacks, but the leader dodges them all without the slightest effort. Completely exhausted after the useless sequence, the young man takes a deep breath, trying to catch his breath. The leader taunts him, asking what he's doing and if his strength is really just that. Maintaining his imposing posture, the man states that the boy should have experienced this power before. That hellish scene full of fury and extreme sadness quickly invades the guy's mind. Remembering the day he exploded with rage, he hears his opponent question what he gained from it. The memory of the dark power flowing through his body brings back the feeling of that time. The protagonist stares at his own hands, beginning to summon the dark energy again. Watching the boy, the commander silently confirms that his suspicions were correct. A violent aura envelopes the young man's arms as he prepares to fight for real. He finally understands that something dormant had awakened within him on that tragic day. In a swift impulse, Ryudo launches a crushing attack of shadow claws against the target. Despite the destruction, Kurosu leaps unharmed through the debris and calls the blow completely clumsy. Not giving up, the boy spins in the air, slicing everything with his shadows, but the enemy just nimbly retreats. Appearing right above in a blind spot, the leader warns that the guy's movements are too slow. With that, the man lands a violent blow that brutally throws the protagonist to the side. The devastating impact hurls the boy hard against the room's floor. Badly injured, the guy tries to stay conscious while acknowledging the enemy's absurd strength. Walking calmly, the leader warns that this confrontation wasn't even a warm-up. The man is cruel, stating that the young man is just a nobody, incapable of protecting the people he loves. Trembling in pain, Ryudo refuses to give up and assures him that he's already made his decision. The emotional memory of Hakwa extending her hand, asking him to live, suddenly emerges. He also recalls the gravely injured girl begging him to tell them everything that happened. Clenching his dark fist, the protagonist swears with all his might that he will save both his friends. Far away, the orange late afternoon peacefully illuminates the buildings of the big city. The quiet scene highlights a simple residential building under the sunset light. Now in her own room, Rakuna watches the scenery through the window as a gentle breeze blows. The girl begins to get ready for the end of the day, setting aside her school uniform. Resting her hands on the windowsill, she takes a deep breath, looking very thoughtful. With a firm and determined look, the young woman swears she will fulfill her objective for the one who saved her. The bright city lights reflect in the girl's eyes, showing her strong conviction. Back to the fight, a brutal, invisible blow throws the boy hard against the Hediot's wall. The guy slides down the destroyed wall as shadow tentacles disappear around him. With no strength left, he collapses face down on the floor, groaning from the massive damage he just took. The commander stops right next to the defeated target and calls his effort utterly pathetic. Looking at the scene, the leader confesses he expected more fun, but was greatly mistaken. As soon as the enemy turns his back to leave, Ryudo pushes himself up from the floor, asking him to wait. Getting up with great difficulty, the young man warns that he doesn't have the luxury of just giving up here. Unleashing a giant blast of dark power, the boy begs the man to continue the fight. Unfazed, Kurosu bats away the shadows using only his hand and notes the guy's stubbornness. The leader's expression becomes much more serious and threatening at the annoying insistence. Deciding to end this, the man activates his own dark energy, which illuminates the entire room. Even injured, the protagonist tries to focus his entire attack into a single direct punch. The opponent notices the young man's trick of hiding in the shadows and finds the tactic interesting, yet useless. In the blink of an eye, the commander lifts the boy into the air using a giant shadow hand. Right after, he smashes the guy against the asphalt outside with absurd violence. Tapping his fingers on a barrel calmly, the leader warns that the guy has no idea how to use his own strength. Completely lost and in pain, the boy tries to get up from the ground, wanting to understand what he meant. With a deep red gaze, the man decides he will forcibly pull out that dormant power. Showing a menacing smile, the commander invokes a frightening dark technique. The scenery changes bizarrely, swallowing the young man into a nocturnal dimension full of white flowers. A bright full moon illuminates the ruins of abandoned, overgrown buildings. Sitting on the destroyed asphalt, the protagonist looks around in awe and asks where he ended up. Kurosu appears imposingly, revealing that this place is the realm of night, a world very different from the real one. The leader explains that this desolate city is known as the true world of aberrations. Still processing everything, the guy remains on the ground, listening intently about the rules of that place. Walking slowly, the man notes that normal doppelgangers don't usually have much magical power. His footsteps echo through the silent scenery as he mentions that an explosion of extreme feelings changes everything. The commander clarifies that this intense emotion can end up awakening special abilities in some individuals. Pointing his finger, the leader states that the young man is exactly one of those cases, leaving the boy shocked. Displaying a very confident and dangerous air, the man extends his hand, calling the guy to a real combat. The boy summons his dark weapon with determination and says he understands the situation. Just then, the leader suddenly lifts his face and tells the guy to wait a moment. They both notice something strange approaching and are confused by the interruption. Surprised by the unforeseen threat, the protagonist recognizes what's coming toward them. A gigantic skeletal aberration emerges in the alley, a native creature of that realm that the commander didn't expect to find there. Drawing his own blade, the man explains that these monsters are a completely different race from those living in the human world. With the imminent danger, he adds a warning that those beasts will never act as allies. A terrible memory invades the young man's mind, showing the brutal attack he suffered in the past. Gripping his weapon tightly, he finally understands that the monster from his past also came from this dark realm. The scary skulls fix their gaze on the duo, confirming they have just noticed their presence in the area. The creature wastes no time and charges full speed through the air, initiating the lethal attack. Quickly, the guy creates a shadow barrier to block the impact and groans from the force of the blow. Seizing the opening, the commander leaps at an absurd speed, slicing the enemy with a precise cut. Maintaining a flawless posture, the man faces the threat with a deadly and fully focused look. Watching the scene, the boy is completely impressed by his battle partner's absurd agility. Turning his face slightly, The leader tells the young man not to back down against an opponent of that level and assures him he'll be watching. Focusing on the combat, Rudo mentally agrees, knowing he needs to defeat those beasts no matter what. Summoning gigantic arms made of darkness, he concludes that without this, he will never be able to change everyone's tragic fate. But the boy's desperate attacks end up having no real effect on the skeletal aberrations. Being pressured by the enemies, the guy realizes with frustration that he can't even get close enough to land a direct hit. Analyzing the fight calmly, the commander questions what exactly the kid is so afraid of. The man notes that the boy would indeed be taken out in an instant if he tried to face the speed and power of those creatures head-on. However, he reminds the young man that his true essence is being a manipulator of shadows. So, Kurosu advises the guy not to limit his attacks by using only his own personal darkness during combat. Nimbly dodging a lethal charge, the protagonist begins to understand the master's valuable tip. Without further hesitation, the boy charges fearlessly straight toward the gigantic monster. The skull opens its mouth wide and fires a devastating energy blast with the intention of incinerating the target. Showing great reflexes, the guy slides across the asphalt, narrowly escaping the deadly beam. The heat of the explosion grazes his body, making the young man let out a tense groan from the extreme effort. Successfully closing the distance, he projects his weapon upwards, ready to counter with everything he's got. The shadow blow hits the aberration's defense, sending sparks flying in a very violent impact. The creature immediately retaliates with brute force, pushing the boy back before he could finish. Regaining his balance in the air, the young man realizes with excitement that he at least managed to reach the enemy this time. Focusing completely on victory, he plants his feet firmly, using the surrounding shadows as an extension of his movement. In a surprising act, the guy dives completely into the scenery's darkness, vanishing from the monster's sight. The strategy works perfectly as his shoes emerge from the ground right behind the distracted target. With a sharp, glowing look in the dark, the protagonist declares that he has finally cornered his opponent. Using the scenery to his advantage, he summons countless arms of darkness from the ground, trapping the giant skeleton. The shadow claws grip the creature with absolute force, preventing any chance of escape or defense. Very confident, the boy yells at the top of his lungs, assuring the aberration it won't escape this time. Completely immobilized by the dark bonds, the beast tries to struggle uselessly in the deadly trap. The young man firmly grips the hilt of his blade, concentrating all his energy for the final blow. In a swift motion, Ryudo delivers a deep cut that tears through the immense skull from top to bottom without mercy. The destructive impact instantly shatters the aberration, scattering its remains throughout the silent alley. Staring at the result of his own strength, the boy is amazed, murmuring that he finally managed to win. Right after the victory, Kurosu calmly walks up to the guy stopping right beside him. With a slight ironic smile, the man comments that eliminating a monster of this level should be child's play. Suddenly, a swift beam of light rips through the air, grazing right past the commander's face. Without even blinking, the leader raises his hand and blocks a sharp claw coming from behind using only his fingers. The sneak attack makes the man's eyes widen slightly, showing a hint of surprise at the audacity. Oblivious to the imminent danger, the young man shows a proud smile, declaring his victory and trying to resume the conversation. But the extreme exhaustion takes its toll, and the protagonist's body collapses forward, completely drained of strength. The boy falls unconscious on the cold asphalt of that bizarre realm, while the man watches him in silence. The commander quickly kneels and supports the fainted boy's body so he doesn't get hurt on the ground. Completely out, Ryudo breathes softly, finally resting from that tense battle. Turning his attention back to the real problem, the leader faces the darkness of the alley with a very cold expression. A gigantic horde of scary skulls begins to emerge from the other side of the gate, thirsty for blood. Accepting the provocation without a shred of fear, the man simply snaps his fingers, creating a luminous spark. The magical energy quickly materializes, taking the form of an immense, incandescent red sword. With a brutal move, he charges against the army, slicing through several monsters at once in a destructive red trail. Standing amidst the massacre, surrounded by impaled bodies, the commander smiles, concluding that the boy could be quite useful. Sometime later, the protagonist slowly opens his eyes, greeted by a strong white light on the ceiling. Sitting on the edge of a comfortable bed, the guy grumbles, completely confused, wanting to know where he ended up. Looking at his own hands in the dimness of the silent room, he tries to process the recent events. The memory of the fight suddenly returns, leaving the young man quite startled by everything he experienced in that distorted realm. Observing the familiar details of the place, He wonders if he has finally returned to the normal human world. Breaking the room's silence, Kurosu appears leaning against the wall, announcing that the sleeper has finally awakened. Startled by the unexpected presence, the boy stammers, quickly agreeing while trying to form a sentence. The leader maintains a serious posture and assures him he will keep his promise to listen to what the brat has to say. With that, the man turns the doorknob, opening the way for them to talk in a more appropriate place. The two proceed to a huge, luxurious meeting room, where the boy stands, looking a bit nervous, sitting comfortably in an armchair. The commander awaits the explanation while the guy hesitates, not knowing how to start the story. Mustering his courage, Ryudo directly reveals the greatest truth of all, stating that he has returned from 1 year in the future. Hearing that absurd declaration, the man narrows his eyes, intrigued, and repeats the word, showing great interest. Nodding firmly, the protagonist declares that if nothing changes, the entire world will completely collapse. Remembering that terrible disaster, the protagonist warns that the entire world will collapse if nothing changes. The image of the carnage with monsters invading the city once again haunts his mind. Looking down, the boy admits that this whole story might seem pretty hard to believe. Kurosu agrees right away, calling the account complete nonsense. However, the guy insists desperately, assuring him that every word of it is the absolute truth. Frustrated with the situation, he wonders if coming back in time was all for nothing. Just then, the leader remains calm and asks what exactly the young man plans to do now. Ryudo is completely caught off guard by the man's unexpected question. Clenching his fist tightly, he hesitates for a moment, trying to formulate his answer. With a focused look, he declares that he wants to become stronger than anyone else. Thus, he promises to annihilate all the aberrations that destroyed his life in the future. Hearing this, the commander gives a slight smile and warns that the brat is still too weak. This brutal honesty shatters the boy's heroic pose in an instant. But the man continues, warning that there is a chance for him to gain power. Completely interested, the protagonist immediately asks what he means by that. The leader explains that in the past, there was a man in the organization known as the Shadow Master. This ally was the true founder of the group and had an absurd talent for controlling darkness. Just like Ryudo, the founder was also a doppelganger who had awakened his abilities. Hearing the story, the guy is startled to discover that Kurosu is a real vampire. To calm things down, the commander says that all this happened a long time ago. Back then, the young Kurosu fought side by side with the legendary Shadow Master on difficult missions. The mysterious partner sliced through monstrous aberrations without the slightest difficulty. Using arms of dark energy, he destroyed enemies with completely overwhelming power. Inspired by that strength, the vampire also attacked the scary creatures with all his might. The ally launched devastating area of effect attacks, tearing through the monsters with brutal blades. Even in the midst of chaos, the man maintained a completely flawless and relentless posture. With that, the leader concludes that his partner was an incredibly veteran and strong warrior. Back in the present, the boy murmurs, quite impressed with this warrior's fame. Suddenly, Kurosu notices movement at the door and announces that the rest of the crew has arrived. Heavy footsteps begin to echo down the hall, confirming that someone is about to enter the room. A group of agents enters the room, asking for permission in a superimposing manner. Ryuto is startled by the absurd number of strong members showing up at once. One of the members bumps lightly into the guy, leaving him completely flustered. Very nervous from the pressure, the boy tries to make space and quickly apologizes. Just then, a masked man stares at the protagonist up close, scaring the newcomer. Lacking patience, the leader tells the brat to stop messing around and get drinks for everyone. One of the agents approaches the table to deliver an urgent report to the commander. With a click of the remote, the ally turns on the room's large screen to show the gathered data. The entire squad pays attention as a detailed map of the city appears on the bright screen. The red dots indicate that several portals are frequently appearing everywhere. Continuing the explanation, the agent points to another suspicious detail in the tracking information. He reveals that the wanted criminal was seen wandering near the rifts again. While Ryudo quietly serves the drinks, the group agrees that he is the main suspect. Thoughtfully, Kurosu suggests that this enemy might be summoning the monsters on purpose. On the other side of the table, the masked man is surprised to notice that the little kid next to him was awake. The commander gets Ryudo's attention, making the kid respond immediately out of shock. Pointing to the screen, the leader tells the guy to report immediately if he crosses paths with the villain. The protagonist stammers, repeating the word, not quite understanding if he's already part of the squad. Leaving no doubt, the vampire decrees that the boy is now an official member of the corporation. This sudden revelation leaves the young man completely speechless and frozen in surprise. The other agents watch the scene, somewhat confused, not knowing exactly who this brat is. Remembering the past, the leader challenges the boy to reach the same level of power as the founder. Motivated by the challenge, the guy adopts a focused expression and accepts the weight of that responsibility. He reflects that by gaining all this strength, he can finally save Rikuna from that cruel fate. Full of conviction, Ryudo promises out loud that he will become the next Shadow Master. The next day, the weather dawns quite peaceful over the school buildings. Inside the main gym, PE class is in full swing with the girls playing volleyball. The tight score is on the board, while the crowd excitedly cheers Rikuna's name. Showing great skill, the young woman jumps high to spike the ball powerfully. The swift attack explodes directly on the opponent's side, giving no one a chance to defend. The other students celebrate the decisive point, praising their teammates' incredible talent. Basking in the celebration, the young woman shows a super happy and proud expression of her own performance. In the other half of the gym, the boys face off in a lively game of basketball. Away from the game, the protagonist watches all the fun of his class in silence. His classmate named Ren puts an arm around the boy, complaining that the other class is having way more fun over there. This same friend asks for his opinion in a laid-back tone during the break. Without waiting for an answer, his classmate drags the guy back onto the court, promising to play seriously. The game resumes intensely, with the team advancing swiftly with the ball on the attack. With absurd agility, Ryudo easily dribbles past his opponents, getting by all of them. In a total panic, the defenders shout to close in and not let the boy escape. But the protagonist dominates the area with incredibly fast and precise movements. Seeing the damage, a student yells for them to try and block the play no matter what. Impressed by his talent, the girls stop what they're doing to watch the court. Rikuna focuses her gaze on the neighboring game, quietly calling her friend's name with curiosity. Ignoring all the heavy defense, the young man leaps into the air, aiming to make the final basket of the game. Showing off all his skill, the protagonist leaps, overcoming the defense to make the decisive basket of the game. After the beautiful play, he celebrates the victory by high-fiving his teammate. In the stands, Rikuna watches the play with great admiration. Soon the bell rings, and the late afternoon arrives with orange light streaming through the windows. Packing up his things in the classroom, Rudo asks his friend what she's doing today. Suddenly, Ren appears, joking around and asking if the two are secretly dating. Completely embarrassed, the duo desperately denies the rumor at the same time. Their classmate gives a little laugh, teasing the funny and shy reaction of his friends. Changing the subject, the guy suggests they visit their secret base to remember the old days. The girl agrees excitedly, noting they haven't been there since middle school, and the protagonist is on board with the idea. Walking together, the trio heads down an alley that leads to an abandoned convenience store. The hidden spot in the forgotten area of the city serves as their old hideout. The dark interior reveals a very simple space with old arcade machines in the corner. Sitting at the table, the young woman comments on how it brings back memories of when they used to run from the teacher's scoldings. With a scowl, Ren curses in frustration just thinking about those tough times. His friend complains about the injustice of getting detention, holding buckets of water in the hallway just because of his looks. In the memory, Rito grumbles that even he got dragged into it, while his friend says she can't take it anymore. Laughing heartily in the present, the boy comments on how that teacher put them through heck. Preparing her own bento box, Rikuna confesses with a smile that she never wants to go through something like that again. Just then, her classmate points to her food and asks if she always eats that. Defending his friend, the protagonist questions what the problem is, since she really likes the dish. Watching the group's happiness, the guy silently reflects on the importance of keeping them safe. With a completely focused look, he promises himself that he needs to protect this world. Suddenly, the cell phone left on the table starts vibrating non-stop, getting their attention. The young man picks up the device, intrigued, trying to figure out who would be texting now. The screen displays an emergency alert from the squad, indicating the elimination of aberrations very close by. His eyes widen in shock as he recognizes the urgent warning, while his classmate calls his name. Noticing the sudden tension, Rikuna asks if something is wrong. Disguising his concern with a weak smile, the guy assures her that everything is fine. In a hurry, he says goodbye, making up an urgent appointment and telling his friends to go on ahead. Worried by his sudden rush, his friend asks him to wait a moment, but the protagonist ignores the call and runs off desperately through the dark alley. As he runs, he curses in frustration that this invasion had to happen right when the group is there. A terrifying female scream cuts through the street's silence, immediately alarming the young man. Identifying the source of the sound, he changes direction, quickening his pace. Reaching the corner, the boy freezes, completely terrified by the unexpected scene. A civilian appears fallen on the ground while another man holds her, asking if she's alive. Staring at the confusion, Ryudo tries to understand what the heck happened to the unconscious woman. However, heavy footsteps echoing nearby suddenly catch the guy's attention. Turning his head instantly, he shouts, demanding to know who is approaching. The squad's executive, Rose, appears, clicking his tongue and wondering if he arrived too late. The man on the ground tells the agent to stay back, while the boy immediately recognizes his allied backup. Analyzing the guy up close, Rose also remembers seeing the brat at the hideout the day before. In the middle of the tense conversation, the veteran notices something bizarre moving in the shadows right behind him. A monstrous, multi-headed aberration emerges from the darkness, ready to attack. The dark alley quickly becomes infested with several of those dangerous creatures. Terrified, the civilian asks what that is, and Rose explains they are shadow eaters. The agent warns that the monsters came from some portal, and they devour people's shadows until they perish. Far from that danger, the pair of friends continues to wait patiently at the secret base. Staring at her cell phone screen, the girl finds Rito's lack of response to her messages strange. Her classmate Ren stretches his arms, relaxed, and suggests they stop by their friend's house since he disappeared. Still with a bad feeling, the young woman just agrees with the idea in a low, worried tone. Unaware of the threat, the two begin to walk back home through the completely deserted streets. Along the way, Rikuna thinks about the possibility of his mother having called, demanding her son's return. Laughing at the guess, her friend agrees that the protagonist's parents have always been overprotective. Observing the melancholic late afternoon, the girl hopes that's the only silly problem. Hiding in the shadows of a nearby alley, one of the bizarre monsters spies on their movements. The young woman suddenly stops walking, feeling a threatening presence very close by. Finding her frozen attitude strange, Ren turns his head and asks what happened. A grotesque aberration silently drops from the wall, ready to attack the girl from behind. Realizing the deadly trap, the girl freezes in terror, letting out a frightened whimper. The guy screams his classmate's name in desperation, seeing the creature charge uncontrollably. With a swift pounce, the monster sinks its claws directly into her shadow projected on the ground. In a bizarre way, the beast pulls the girl's dark silhouette and begins to cruelly devour it. Immediately, Rikuna feels her energy being drained and loses all signs of strength. Dropping her folder, the young woman collapses to her knees, realizing her own shadow is completely disappearing. Unable to resist, she topples over, unconscious, onto the cold asphalt with a heavy thud. Witnessing this tragedy helplessly, her friend bellows at the top of his lungs, completely in shock. Returning to the other alley, the situation also worsens as the horde corners the protagonist and the agent. One of the creatures leaps fiercely, ready to sink its teeth into the distracted boy. Showing great agility, Rose jumps from the side wall to intercept the threat in mid-air. The experienced fighter extends his hand firmly, focusing on the flying enemy target. With a brutal attack, the veteran violently smashes the monster against the ground, destroying the creature. Impressed, Ryudo's eyes widen at the display of raw strength from his new battle colleague. Enraged by their ally's fall, the entire horde lets out a terrifying roar, ready to slaughter them. Rose adjusts his glove, grumbling that the report indicated the presence of 7 of those creatures in the area. Right after, he activates his dark power, and the agent's hands quickly transform into monstrous claws. Assuming the imposing form of a fierce werewolf, the executive confidently announces he'll finish them all off himself. Without wasting time, the veteran charges at an absurd speed down the alley, promising to finish the job once and for all. With a swift and brutal attack, he slices through several monsters simultaneously, sending the creatures flying through the air without the slightest difficulty. Impressed by the scene, Ryudo realizes in shock that his ally's speed and power increased absurdly after the transformation. Showing all his experience, Rose announces he's taken down 4 and prepares to hunt the rest of the enemies. Realizing their absurd disadvantage, 2 of the surviving aberrations turn their backs and start to flee desperately down the alley. One of the creatures quickly enters a dark side street, letting out a terrified grunt during its frantic escape. Seeing the target escape, the protagonist charges forward hastily, telling the monster to wait right there. But Rose calls the boy an idiot and tells him not to go running off alone like that, clicking his tongue in annoyance. Just then, another enemy tries to interfere, and the werewolf tears the beast in half, ordering it to get out of the way. Free from immediate danger, the veteran looks for the guy in the alley, trying to figure out which way the rookie went. Running down the street, the young man recognizes the way to the secret base and decides he needs to take down the monster before it reaches his friends. Being very agile, he summons shadow claws, trapping the fleeing beast, and decrees that it will not get away unpunished. Pulling the enemy back with full force, Ryudo uses his darkness to force the aberration to come straight toward him. Taking advantage of the pull's force, the boy lands a perfect shadow blow and cuts off the creature's head in a brutal move. The monster's decapitated body collapses heavily onto the asphalt, confirming another successful elimination for the night. Exhausted after the tense chase, the guy takes a deep, relieved breath, trying to catch his breath from the run. Doing the math, he deduces that there's only one enemy left and hopes very much that Racuna and Ren are safe. With this worry in mind, the boy starts running hastily again through the destroyed scenery to find the last target. Along the way, the protagonist continues to desperately hope that his classmates have already returned home safely. However, turning the corner, he gets a huge shock when he finds Ren kneeling on the ground in a complete state of shock. Running toward them, Rito calls out to his friends, terrified, while his classmate murmurs his name back, very scared. Kneeling beside the unconscious girl, the guy panics, demanding to know what the heck happened there. Crying heavily, Ren explains that a black monster suddenly attacked and apologizes for not being able to do anything. Quickly, the protagonist assures him it wasn't his fault and asks if his classmate is hurt, hearing that he's fine. Assessing the dangerous situation on the street, Ryudo suggests they need to hide inside an old pharmacy nearby. Now inside the safe location, Ren rummages through the dirty cabinets, looking for anything that might be useful for the situation. Just then, the boy suddenly stands up and tells his classmate to keep an eye on Racuna, who is lying on the worn-out sofa. His friend stops what he's doing and asks, quite confused, where Ryuto is thinking of going at a time like this. With an extremely serious look, the protagonist announces he's going to hunt the monster and get her shadow back, as it's the only way. The young woman remains completely unconscious on the couch, suffering the bizarre consequences of that dangerous aberration's attack. Internally shaken, the boy curses, realizing this attack didn't happen before, and that the future has already been altered. Frightened by the suicidal plan, his classmate questions how the heck he plans to get a shadow back alone like that. Trying to project as much confidence as possible, the guy interrupts his friend's despair, assuring him that everything will be okay. Walking to the exit, he reinforces his request for Ren to take care of her and solemnly swears he will save his friend. Ignoring his classmate's desperate call, the young man dashes swiftly through the door, back to the violent street. Running down the sidewalk, he notices several civilians lying on the ground and concludes with frustration that they all lost their shadows too. Suddenly turning to check a dark alley, the protagonist's eyes widen as he finally spots his hidden target. Focusing his vision in the darkness, he confirms with great anger that he has found the one responsible for all this damage. The grotesque monster appears crouched at the end of the alley, finishing devouring the shadow of yet another helpless victim. As soon as the beast swallows the energy, Rudo quickly deduces that this is the seventh and final creature of the invading group. Putting the pieces together instantly, he concludes with certainty that the same monster swallowed his friend's shadow. Taken over by uncontrollable fury, the young man charges with a powerful leap, letting out a war cry as he prepares his dark blade. The creature senses the imminent danger and raises its strange arms, managing to block the initial impact of the attack. Without retreating an inch, the protagonist quickly transforms his weapon into a giant scythe and tries to slice the beast. But Ryudo gets a huge shock when his aggressive blow doesn't have the expected effect against the aberration's body. Showing bizarre agility, the dark monster dodges the swift cut by quickly leaping to the opposite side. The guy freezes, confused, as the hideous creature turns its back and starts running frantically down the alley to try and escape. Regaining focus on the target, the boy charges swiftly after the enemy, telling the useless beast to stop immediately. During the hectic chase, he reaches a corner and peeks cautiously to try and predict the fugitive's movement. Staring at the end of the alley, the protagonist's eyes widen, completely shocked by the unexpected scene. A gigantic dimensional rift appears, tearing through space, as the aberration leaps directly into the bright light. Realizing he's about to lose sight of the creature, the guy runs with all his might, determined not to let the beast disappear. Suddenly, an unknown girl wearing a blindfold extends her arm, yelling for the young man not to do something so crazy. Ryudo screeches to a halt and turns his face, startled by the mysterious girl's sudden interruption. The protagonist stares at the newcomer with great suspicion, demanding to know who the heck she is. The light-haired young woman remains in an alert stance in the middle of the illuminated alley, analyzing the boy without saying a word. Getting a better look at the mysterious girl's features, the guy goes into deep shock, murmuring the name of the companion who had perished. Maintaining a defensive posture, Hakua tells him to back off, warning that the portal leads directly to a fatal place. Still a bit dazed, the boy takes out his cell phone, showing his organization ID to calm her down, confirming he's an ally. She examines the profile, completely confused, while the guy concludes that her past version doesn't know him yet. Putting the device away, Ryudo charges forward, ignoring her warnings, and states that he's going into the rift to save his friend. Seeing the kid's absurd stubbornness, the warrior grabs his wrist firmly, telling him to wait a second. The young woman warns about the risk of the portal closing and directly asks if he has mastered the transposition technique. The boy stares at the glowing vortex, a bit tense, wanting to confirm if it can really close, and she assures him it can. Explaining the situation, the veteran teaches that the gates naturally disappear once the creatures gather enough energy and are eliminated. Noticing the rookie's inexperience, the young doppelganger sighs and announces she will accompany him on this risky mission. Greatly relieved by the providential help, the boy thanks her, stammering, feeling immense gratitude for having her there again. With the plan set, the duo walk side by side, bravely entering the luminous portal in the middle of the street. Crossing the dimensional rift, they land safely on the roof of a building in that distorted realm. Immediately, the protagonist analyzes the bizarre landscape, trying to locate where that shadow-eating monster fled. Breaking the heavy mood, the girl suddenly remembers they haven't introduced themselves and says her own name, asking for his. Ryudo hesitates for a fraction of a second and starts to answer, showing an expression full of nostalgia in front of the warrior. Resuming the conversation in the midst of chaos, the boy hesitates a bit before finally revealing his identity. Being completely honest, the protagonist introduces himself as Salt and confirms he is a doppelganger, just like her. Hakua shows slight surprise and comments calmly that it seems he already knew that secret. Right after, the young man asks if she has any clues, but she says she doesn't know the exact location, only that they preferred deep shadows. Ryudo questions about this darkness, and his companion confirms that to get everything back, they need to defeat the enemy there. She explains that the devoured shadows always return to their original owners as soon as the creature is eliminated. Continuing the explanation, the warrior assures him that his friend will be fine as long as the rescue happens within 24 hours. Understanding the time limit perfectly, the guy adopts a very determined expression and immediately agrees to the mission. Just then, the young woman suggests they start their search by checking the places where these aberrations usually gather. Walking together out of an abandoned building, the boy thinks to himself where that cowardly beast could be hiding. Assessing the environment, Hakua notes that the target isn't around, so the guy proposes going deeper, but she immediately refuses. The warrior points to the sky, warning that the red moon is about to rise, which will make the aberrations of that realm much stronger. Standing in the middle of the destroyed street, she suggests they retreat for now due to the extreme danger approaching. However, the protagonist clenches his own fist tightly, determined to never again lose anyone important in his life. Completely focused on rescuing Racuna, he advances alone, announcing he will continue no matter what, surprising his companion. Trying to warn him of the real risk, the warrior emphasizes that this place becomes extremely deadly at night, but Ryudo continues walking under the crimson moonlight, firmly declaring that he won't run away this time. Noticing the guy's unshakable determination, the young doppelganger hesitates for a moment and then quickly runs after him, letting out a long sigh of resignation. She finally gives in and agrees to accompany the stubborn boy. Observing the vast ruined city, Hakua promises she will stay by her companion's side until the end of that dangerous journey. Soon after, the two notice several shadows peeking over a wall, and the protagonist finds it strange, thinking they are humans. The warrior corrects him, saying they must be aberrations from the living world, and that this will be a very annoying problem. Staring at the glowing eyes in the darkness, the boy agrees that dealing with that bunch will indeed be a major hassle. As time passes, the duo enters a strange forest area illuminated by a pink glow and exotic flowers on the ground. Stopping in the middle of the dark grove, the guy suggests they investigate the region carefully, looking for the enemy target. Meanwhile, Hakua maintains a silent and attentive expression, making her companion feel a bit guilty. Regretful, Ryudo apologizes for dragging his partner there, but she assures him it was her own free will. Suddenly, a super-fast wooden arrow cuts through the air, zipping right toward the two distracted youths. completely caught off guard by the sneak attack. The protagonist lets out a startled shout. They quickly dodge, getting into a combat stance, while the guy demands to know who is hiding in the bushes. Frustrated for missing the lethal shot, a small creature with a sack on its head clicks its tongue in the darkness. Right after, an entire band of these bizarre little monsters armed with spears and bows emerges from the bushes. Ryudo asks who they are, and Hakuwa explains they are Minats, weak but very smart and threatening monsters. The leader of the small aberrations shows a devilish smile, facing the invaders of his sacred territory, trying to resolve things peacefully. The boy asks for permission to pass and assures them they don't want to hurt anyone there. But the creature tells him to shut up, calling the guy trash and declaring that this place belongs only to them. The protagonist tries to argue, saying that the duo is also made up of aberrations, just like the enraged band. Laughing in his face, the little monster says they are very different, as his tribe devours humans without mercy. This terrible declaration makes Ryudo's eyes widen in pure shock, completely disgusted by the nature of these beasts. Drooling with desire, the small aberration describes the taste of human flesh and claims it's an addiction for life. Seized by immediate revulsion, the young man's face hardens, and he decrees that in that case, they will never be able to truly understand each other. One of the henchmen nudges the leader, wanting to know what the final fate of this presumptuous pair of invaders in the grove will be. The entire band begins to shout in a euphoric chorus, demanding the immediate execution of the two for invading their area. Resting his axe on his shoulder, the leader smiles maliciously and announces that the tribe's verdict has already been clearly decided. Without wasting time, Ryuto and Hakuwa simultaneously summon their blades, preparing for the imminent combat. Seeing the horde charge fiercely, the guy concludes they have no other choice, and his partner agrees instantly. The army of minutes surrounds the two from all sides, while the enemy archers position themselves in the surrounding trees. Hidden among the high branches, one of the archers fires a deadly arrow directly at the duo. With quick reflexes, Hakuwa spins her blade, slicing the attack before it could hit either of them. Seizing the opening, the protagonist summons a gigantic hand of darkness to defend himself and shouts his companion's name. The warrior leaps, dodging several blows on the ground, and apologizes while telling the guy to be very careful. Fending off the constant charges, Rito curses in frustration, realizing the number of enemies is gigantic. Analyzing the tribe's tactic, his partner suggests taking out their leader first to break the band's perfect coordination. With their objective set, the two start running full speed toward the chief, knocking down the smaller monsters along the way. They break through the enemy's defense line and quickly approach the main target, who waits, holding a heavy axe, completely underestimating the threat. The little monster gives a mocking laugh and challenges the youths to catch him if they can. Focused on the attack, Hakuwa charges hastily without looking at the ground, and the protagonist screams in panic for her to wait a moment. With no time to stop, the girl's foot steps right onto a fake pile of loose leaves covering the forest floor. Ryudo runs desperately, trying to reach his friend before the ambush finishes the job. But the young woman plummets into a deep pit, and the boy throws himself into the air right after her as the monsters celebrate their trap. Plunging into the abyss, the boy extends his hand with wide eyes in a useless effort to try and grab his friend. Up top, the monster leader peeks over the hole, laughing maniacally and telling the invaders to just perish already. Falling rapidly down a dark, endless shaft, the two youths scream at the top of their lungs, completely out of control. They are thrown out of a giant sewer pipe directly toward a flooded underground reservoir. The duo hits the water violently, creating a large splash that echoes through the hidden cavern beneath the earth. Soaked, they recover from the impact as Hakuwa comments they were very lucky to fall into the deep water down there. Now calmer and panting, the guy analyzes the strange environment, wanting to understand where the heck they ended up. The protagonist takes the first step, splashing water to investigate the unknown and completely silent scenery. Walking together through the circular, flooded hall, Ryudo realizes with fascination that the soft lighting comes from the surrounding flowers. Looking at the opening in the ceiling, the warrior confirms it's one of their traps and warns that the red moon's effect has already begun. The young woman sighs worriedly, revealing that during this period, they lose the magical ability to return to the living world. Confused, Ryudo asks for an explanation, and she clarifies that one normally only enters here using abilities or by crossing the portals. But Hakuwa concludes that the moon's extreme energy completely blocks any attempt to use these escape alternatives. Staring at the exit high above, the girl declares they need to find a way to climb up, as that's the only visible route. Without losing hope, The protagonist agrees and starts walking, asking what her plan is for them to escape from there. Sliding through the dark, wet tunnel, the boy tries to understand his friend's plan. The duo is thrown by the pipe's violent current straight into the unknown. Just then, the protagonist desperately tries to grab onto the stone ledge, but Hakua screams her companion's name, warning of the imminent danger. Unable to hold on, Ryudo falls clumsily while the girl lands in style. Lying on the ground in pain, he grumbles that he almost had it, and she tells him not to push his luck. Soaked by the sewer water, the boy ends up letting out a loud sneeze. The warrior just watches her partner try to clean himself off in absolute silence. Suddenly, she firmly grabs his hand, leaving the guy completely surprised. Pulling her colleague close, the young woman explains they need to stick together to conserve heat. She suggests they rest a bit, since they've been running non-stop since they arrived. The two end up sitting, leaning against each other on the cold floor, leaving the guy super awkward. Breaking the silence, Hakua calls his name and asks why he's in Yatagarasu. Hearing the direct question, the boy's expression changes as he remembers something important. The tragic image of his friend perishing and telling him to find Kurosu comes rushing back. The scene of destruction reflects the young man's desperation in the face of that sacrifice. In that painful time, the injured warrior asked him to pass on an urgent message. With a bloody hand, the young woman revealed that a girl had made a request to her in the past. Back in the present, the protagonist tells his partner about this mysterious message. Thus, he reveals seriously that their world will soon be destroyed by aberrations. The memory of the torn sky and monsters annihilating the city resurfaces strongly. The girl questions the meaning of that, and he confesses that he needed to do something. Ryudo admits that this whole story sounds crazy, but he assures her it's the truth. The young doppelganger listens to her colleague's confession, maintaining a very serene expression. Soon, she comments that he's quite mysterious, but he doesn't seem to be lying. Greatly relieved by her response, the guy asks if she really believes him. With a slight smile, Hakua confesses she feels comfortable talking with her partner. However, this makes the boy remember Rikuna, lamenting that he never told her the truth. Mustering his courage, the protagonist takes advantage of the calm to ask an important question. The warrior turns her face, paying full attention to what her ally has to say. Being direct, he wants to know her opinion on the fact that they curse their own counterparts. The guy lowers his head, questioning if entities like them should even exist. The warrior tries to comfort her friend, but a thunderous noise interrupts their conversation. She looks up startled. As she realizes something is falling from the cavern ceiling, the two leap desperately, narrowly managing to dodge the giant rocks. Looking up, they notice that the tribe of little monsters has found their hiding spot. One of the enemies shows a malicious smile as the duo realizes they are about to be buried alive. The small monsters begin to hurl dozens of explosive barrels straight into the hole. Immediately, Rudo throws himself in front of his partner, taking the defensive line. A devastating explosion completely engulfs the underground area in a violent flash. Up above, the enemy horde celebrates, certain that the invaders have been crushed. The huge hole is completely filled with debris and dense smoke after the attack. But at the bottom of the cavern, the protagonist holds up a barrier, protecting his unharmed ally. The boy dispels the magic and focuses his gaze on the top of the tunnel, completely concentrated. Believing in their victory, the band of beasts turns their backs, preparing to leave. Without wasting time, the guy plants his feet firmly on the debris, using the rocks as a platform. He shoots up vertically through the tunnel at an absurd speed, startling the enemies. The little monsters are in total shock to see their target emerging from the depths. The protagonist lands safely on the forest floor, facing the furious tribe. Right after, Hakua also arrives up top, relieved by their successful escape. Summoning his dark blade, the young man ironically notes that the ambush ended up saving them both. Very annoyed by the taunt, the enemy leader orders a full-out attack against the duo. Focused on the combat, the partners charge forward with everything they've got, wielding their respective weapons. Showing perfect synchronization, they slice through several monsters simultaneously in the forest. Seeing his army being decimated in seconds, the chief realizes his disadvantage and tries to retreat. However, Rudo instantly appears right behind the target, trapping the beast in a shadow hand. The boy displays a deadly and completely focused look, decreeing the end of that battle. With a relentless blow, he tears through the enemy's body, sending blood flying through the air. Determination shines in the young man's eyes as he maintains his combat stance. The devastating impact cuts the grotesque creature, neutralizing the threat for good. Now with his feet on the ground, the guy comments with a sigh that the interruption was very annoying. Resuming their main mission, The youths start running swiftly again through the dark alleys. Suddenly, the two screech to a halt as they hear footsteps just ahead. A gigantic, horned humanoid monster walks in the middle of the destroyed street. Facing the imposing beast, the protagonist states with relief that he's finally found the target. Unleashing a giant dark hand, the boy charges forward, assuring the creature it won't escape. But the monster just calmly turns its head, noticing the spell's approach. With brute force, the aberration smashes the boy's power, shattering the shadow in mid-air. The creature turns completely, holding a giant club in a super menacing way. Ryudo's eyes widen, completely in shock at having his attack nullified so easily. Without hesitation, Hakwa enters the combat, leaping into a swift and courageous charge. She lands a direct cut, but the beast blocks the blade with its arm, taking no damage. The duo retreats, frustrated, realizing the enemy's physical strength is on an absurd level. Annoyed by their audacity, the monster swings its heavy weapon, preparing an overwhelming attack. The partners leap back at the last second, dodging a destructive red wave. Running down the destroyed street, Hakwa deduces that the creature has devoured an absurd amount of human shadows. The monster swings its club, breaking the buildings, and the girl gets tense, not knowing how to act. Assessing the imminent situation, she concludes that joining their shadows might give them a chance at victory. Just then, the aberration launches a crushing red energy attack, forcing the duo to dodge across the asphalt. During the frantic escape, Ryudo asks how exactly they would go about combining their dark powers. The warrior urgently extends her hand, asking her partner to grab it as quickly as possible. Without hesitating in the face of danger, the guy immediately agrees and brings his own hand close to hers. As soon as their palms touch, a bright energy begins to flow intensely between the two combatants. The dark power envelops the protagonist's body, and he adopts a completely focused expression for the attack. A gigantic dark aura explodes around them, tearing up the asphalt under the enemy beast's gaze. Taking advantage of the magical flow, the boy stretches his arm, aiming directly at the giant creature on the other side. A colossal beam of darkness is fired with full force against the aberration waiting ahead. The lethal impact hits the target square on, making the beast roar in pure pain as it's swallowed by the power. Being completely crushed by the violent magic, the grotesque creature collapses heavily to its knees. To finish the job for good, Ryudo projects his blade into the air, assuring that the fight ends now. Leaping high, the boy dives with a gigantic shadow blade straight into the enemy's back. The brutal cut tears through the beast from top to bottom in a devastating and incredibly swift attack. The aberration dissolves into pieces, spreading energy throughout the alley as the young man lands safely on the ground. Impressed with his own weapon, he notes that his strength increased greatly with the help of his doppelganger ally. Hakwa runs toward him, celebrating their great victory, and her partner agrees, quite excited about the end of the fight. Immediately, dozens of dark silhouettes begin to leak directly from the remains of the slain monster. Watching the energies rise to the heavens, the warrior announces that everything will now return to its original owners. However, the guy notices that the red moon is still active and understands they are still trapped in that terrible realm. Soon after, the young woman points to the sky, drawing her companion's attention to a very important change. The moon returns to its normal silver color, confirming that the duo can finally return to the human world. The protagonist breathes a sigh of relief at the wonderful news, knowing the lethal danger has passed. Crossing the luminous portal, the duo walks calmly through an alley in the now peaceful human city. Keeping a steady pace, the boy thinks of his helpless friend and anxiously hopes she is completely safe. He takes advantage of the calm to thank her for her company, but his partner replies that she was just doing her duty as a senior. Suddenly, the warrior stops walking, interrupting their path very abruptly and silently. The girl confesses she feels like he was actually the one who saved her, but the guy promptly denies it, turning his face away. Being very humble, he assures her he never would have beaten that dangerous enemy if he were there alone. Finding his sincerity amusing, his ally suggests they classify the final victory as a great joint effort. The young man thanks her once more for her help, while she says she will make a full mission report for the base. As soon as the warrior turns her back to leave in the darkness, Rito hastily asks her to wait a moment. He brings up that sensitive topic about the fatal curse they discussed earlier in the underground cavern. The young woman looks over her shoulder, silently awaiting the continuation of her ally's heavy question. In the memory, the guy questioned how she felt knowing she was taking out her true human copy. Completely unsure of his own fate, he asked if copier monsters like them shouldn't exist. Back in the silent present, his partner adopts a more serious posture as she processes her colleague's pain. Very directly, She states that causing this deadly tragedy is the inevitable fate of their dark species. His painful past comes to mind, and the girl explains that nothing can undo the tragedy that has already happened. Looking the boy in the eyes, the warrior decrees that the only way out is to find one's own way to atone for the mistake. Ryudo is left confused by the enigmatic words and asks how exactly he should seek this so-called atonement. Maintaining her usual calm, his friend advises that this is an answer only he can discover for himself in life. The protagonist absorbs the advice silently and repeats her words, reflecting on the weight of this journey. In a comforting tone, she assures him that the boy can always come to her to talk if things get tough. Hearing that unconditional support makes the guy smile, feeling a huge relief in his heart. Thus, the young woman bids him a cordial farewell and leaps up the alley walls to return to the secret organization. Watching her solitary departure, the young man waves his hand, mentally thanking her for all the essential assistance. Alone on the empty street, he adopts a serious and determined expression, remembering what still needs to be done. Without wasting any more time, the guy dashes down the sidewalk straight toward the old abandoned pharmacy. He opens the door, panting, apologizing profusely for taking so long to return to the hideout. Inside, Ren lets out a long sigh of extreme relief upon confirming that his best friend has finally returned alive. Entering the messy hall, the boy feels much more at ease noticing that his blonde colleague is safe and sound on the floor. Immediately, the guy runs past everything to check on the condition of his friend stretched out ahead. The protagonist kneels worriedly beside the young woman, who remains completely unconscious on the torn upholstery. He happily notices that her shadow has returned, while the girl begins to groan slightly, waking from her trance. Racuna slowly opens her eyes and murmurs her friend's name, still very weak from the shadow attack. Sitting up slowly on the seat, she scratches her head, very lost, and asks the guys where the heck she is. Trying to piece together fragmented memories of the night, the girl innocently asks if she was just sleeping. Ryudo exhales a deep sigh, feeling immense joy at seeing her without any injuries. On the other side of the room, Ren watches the reunion in silence, trying to understand the strange atmosphere between them. Suddenly, his colleague quickly gets up and holds the girl's hands, celebrating with relief that she's back to normal. She finds his exaggerated reaction strange, not remembering the danger, and the blonde guy tries to bring up the bizarre monster. The boy acts super fast, demanding immediate silence, leaving his partner completely confused by the abrupt cut off. Whispering secretly to his colleague, the young man warns that it's better not to tell the truth now to avoid more useless panic. Noticing the little secret, Racuna demands to know what happened, and the blonde guy starts to stammer, unable to lie well under pressure. Cutting off the interrogation, Ryudo pulls the girl, telling her they need to go to the hospital for an immediate medical check-up. Ren stares at his best friend very suspiciously, knowing clearly that he is hiding a very serious secret. Later that same serene night, the trio arrives at the facade of the city's main hospital very safely. After going through the emergency consultation, the girl leaves the doctor's office, thanking the doctors for the quick service. Her colleague runs up, asking for the test results, and she confirms with a smile that she has absolutely no hidden injuries. Searching the bright corridors, the blonde guy notices the protagonist's disappearance, and his friend just says he went out to run an errand. Taking advantage of the moment alone, his colleague seriously points out how Ryudo's mysterious actions have been super suspicious today. The colleague seriously questions how Ryudo plans to recover the shadow alone in such a dangerous way. Maintaining his calm under pressure, the protagonist assures him that everything will be fine in the end. Just then, Ren reflects suspiciously, remembering how his friend dodged the monster as if he knew something secret. Now outside the hospital at night, the young man gently gets the girl's attention. He asks how much she remembers about what happened that day, leaving his friend completely confused. Her mind tries to recall any memory of the exact moment the dark creature attacked her in the alley. Thoughtfully, the young woman only remembers that something black suddenly appeared before she passed out completely. Walking beside her, the guy questions with a firm look if his friend knows what an aberration is. Racuna repeats the word, completely lost, not understanding the meaning of that sudden question. Far away, the protagonist continues to sit alone on a deserted park bench in the early morning hours. He concludes that the blonde guy definitely suspects something serious, and is unsure of how to act from now on. Looking at the illuminated lamppost, the boy ponders whether he should be honest and reveal the truth about the monsters once and for all. However, he quickly gives up, concluding that confessing the truth would make his friend discover he is not the real human. A sad memory of that encounter in the dark alley resurfaces in his mind, reinforcing the lie. Remembering the fake life he took on, the boy hears his friends' voices calling him to play ball. The young man waves excitedly during the game, having fun with that peaceful school life. But the protagonist lowers his head, admitting that it's still not the right time to reveal his true identity. A few days pass, and the boy once again walks alone through the strange alleys of the lost area. Looking at his cell phone, he tries to focus on the location of the training center so as not to be late. Distracted by the screen, the guy ends up walking right past a strange man in a white lab coat on the narrow street. Suddenly, the boy feels a very strong and sinister chill run through his entire body at once. Frightened by the sudden sensation, the young man immediately turns his head back. However, the dirty corridor is already completely empty with no sign of that man nearby. Trying to calm down, he thinks it was just his imagination and tries to focus on the device again. Just then, the protagonist's gaze notices something strange up ahead, catching his attention. Standing in front of a very simple metal door, the guy deduces that he has finally found the secret hideout. Pushing the doorknob slowly, he enters the place, remembering the warning that it would be unlocked. The boy begins to descend a long, silent staircase that leads directly to the basement. Entering a huge hall, he asks for permission and hears a deep voice calling him from above. A man in glasses leans on the railing, greeting the newcomer, leaving the boy completely surprised. Maintaining a super relaxed posture, Executive Rose announces that he will be his official instructor from today on. Quite nervous, the young man agrees with great formality, but the veteran immediately asks him to relax. Coming down the stairs, the instructor states that he will only go over the absolute basics of Yatagarasu first. He calmly mentions that the first technique taught will be nocturnal transmigration. The protagonist hears the name of the spell, paying close attention to every word from his superior. The memory of the commander activating that dark and frightening magic comes rushing back to the boy's mind. He recalls that devastated world full of ruins illuminated by the mysterious white flowers. Focused on the explanation, the guy concludes that this was the same ability used by the chief in the last fight. Rose points, confirming if the rookie has visited the place a few times, receiving an immediate positive nod. With a playful nudge, the executive decrees that without being able to access that realm on his own, he will be useless. The veteran details that the young man needs to be able to tear through space to connect the two dimensions with great precision. Furthermore, he seriously warns that any miscalculation could hurl the user into another time period. Sweating nervously, the boy desperately asks how exactly he should align these dangerous coordinates. Soon, the superior holds up a glowing blue stone, explaining that this mineral will serve as a magic compass. Handing the gem to the guy, he warns that he needs to subdue the aberration that dwells within the stone before using it. Without any warning, a gigantic dark energy full of creepy eyes leaks from within the blue mineral. The bizarre creature floats in the air, staring at the environment with its dozens of intense reddish pupils. Totally terrified by the surprise incubation, the protagonist lets out a scream, taking a clumsy leap backward. With the huge shock, the magic gem slips from his trembling hands, falling directly onto the smooth floor of the hall. The little shadow monster starts to let out a disturbing laugh, making fun of the poor guy's cowardly reaction. Sitting casually on the stairs, the instructor just announces that he will be watching the commotion from a distance to evaluate the student's posture. But the flying beast ignores the peaceful advice and charges like a bolt of lightning to finish off the distracted target. Ryuto's eyes widen in panic, demanding that the weird creature wait a second before the fatal attack. Meanwhile, in a huge, dilapidated, and abandoned housing complex, a terrible atmosphere hangs in the air. Firm, slow footsteps echo through the dark corridors of the isolated building, showing someone mysterious walking. The man in the white lab coat opens the door to one of the apartments, calmly announcing that he's finally home. In a dark corner of the room, a monstrously large aberration mutters frighteningly that it's hungry again. Without showing any fear of the beast, the villain simply questions how that thing can feel hungry so quickly. The grotesque creature takes a step forward, growling in the dark that it couldn't stand that miserable amount of food anymore. Displaying a dangerous red look and a sadistic smile, the man agrees to the request and suggests they start hunting immediately. The villain looks up, staring at the skeletal face of his monstrous brother, and swears revenge on the humans who did this. The next day, the city's high school dawns bathed in beautiful sunlight, looking more peaceful than ever. Inside one of the classrooms, students chat relaxedly, lazily waiting for another ordinary class to begin. However, the protagonist is completely passed out, slumped over his desk, suffering the physical consequences of intense training. Sitting in the chair in front, Racuna focuses her gaze on her friend's tired face, showing very evident concern. The loud bell quickly echoes through the buildings, marking the end of the long afternoon school period. Lifting his head with some difficulty, the boy gives a long stretch along with a big yawn. Standing firmly at the edge of his desk, his friend complains with a hand on her hip, demanding to know why all he does is sleep lately. Stuttering awkwardly, the guy makes up the worst possible excuse, claiming he's been pulling all-nighters playing online games. The girl sighs and looks down, completely silent, looking very sad about her companion's blatant lie. Finding her heavy attitude strange, Ryudo realizes she's been weird like this since the day they visited the old hideout. Breaking the silence, his friend raises her voice, drawing his attention exactly to that fateful day. Caught off guard by the direct cut to the forbidden topic, the young man stammers, letting out a nervous sound of surprise. The young woman grabs the guy's arm tightly, demanding to know in no uncertain terms what actually happened on that abandoned street. With a fixed gaze, she asks the fatal question, wanting to understand why he ran away so suddenly from the secret base, leaving the two of them alone. Pushed against the wall, the protagonist tries to invent a lame excuse and stammers that nothing much happened that day. But the frightening memory of the dark creature, grabbing the girl suddenly comes rushing back to her mind. Holding her own arm tightly, the young woman insists that she was attacked by a very bizarre black monster. Trying to calm the situation, Ryudo lies, saying she was just very tired and that aberrations don't exist. Annoyed with the runaround, she points out that Ren also keeps avoiding the same question all the time. With a completely fixed gaze on her friend, the girl directly asks if he is hiding some secret from her. The guy jumps up from his chair, assuring her he's not hiding anything. But his friend retorts instantly, stating it's a lie. Completely cornered, the boy runs desperately out of the classroom, leaving everyone behind. Looking at the empty desk, Racuna sighs in frustration, concluding that her classmate only knows how to tell lies. Outside, the young man leans against the wall, remembering another time in the past when he also tried to lie. On that occasion, he ran down the hallways apologizing and making up that he urgently needed to use the restroom. The girl was left behind, completely confused, not understanding why he ran away so suddenly like that. A nostalgic memory emerges, showing the two of them playing in a very sunny park during their childhood. Swinging together on the playground, little Ryudo gets his friend's attention very calmly. Looking down, somewhat downcast, he suddenly confesses that he might end up perishing very soon. Back in the 8th grade, the boy spent his time on the swings while thinking about his own dark fate. Completely surprised by his pessimistic words, Racuna asks where he got that crazy idea out of nowhere. Getting off the swing, the protagonist just turns his back and apologizes in case the worst happens. He runs off through the park without explanation, ignoring his companion's desperate shouts for him to wait. Later that same day, the scene shows the girl's house under a very melancholic late afternoon. Sitting in her own room, the young woman rests her chin on her hand, muttering her friend's name with great concern. Suddenly, her mother bursts into the room, flinging the door open to deliver terrible news. The woman desperately tells her that Ryudo drowned in the ocean, leaving the girl in a complete state of shock. Back in the present in the classroom, the girl clutches her own skirt tightly, trying to control her frustration. Staring at the courtyard through the window, she mutters that her friend almost scared her to pieces with that lie from the past. Far away, the boy walks alone through the school hallways, letting out a deep, tired sigh. Going down the stairs, he deduces that his classmates are suspicious, but he refuses to involve them in such great danger. Just then, his cell phone beeps, revealing a mission alert to eliminate an aberration in an abandoned factory. Analyzing the coordinates on the screen, the guy realizes that running away from school now would only make his friend more doubtful. However, he clenches his fist very firmly, knowing he can't simply ignore the call of duty. Running hastily down the empty hallway, the young man mentally apologizes, assuring her that all this training is precisely to protect her. A memory of his training shows the boy charging swiftly with his blade against that little monster full of eyes. Using all his agility, the protagonist delivers a brutal blow, slicing the weird creature without any mercy. The monster dissolves into black smoke, revealing the small, glowing blue stone that falls directly to the floor. Very out of breath, the guy hears instructor Rose praise his good performance on his first attempt at magical combat. With a gloved hand, the veteran picks up the glowing mineral from the floor with great ease. The superior explains that by using this stone, it's possible to transmigrate to the realm of night or even banish enemies there. He adds a warning that fighting in the human world would reveal the corporation's existence, and that would be a huge problem. pointing his finger with confidence. The man assures him he's counting on the rookie, and the boy stammers in immediate agreement. Checking his own watch, the executive suddenly remembers that the guy's combat uniform should be arriving. Back in the present, the scene shows the large industrial zone full of warehouses where the mission will take place. Now at the meeting point, Hakua raises her hand, calling her companion in a super excited way. Surprised to find his colleagues, Ryudo asks if they were also assigned to take down the target in that region. Taking a drag from his cigarette, the veteran clarifies that he actually summoned the boy because he manages that entire area. The rookie appears wearing his new, very well-fitted combat coat, while his master compliments his intimidating look. With a gentle smile, the girl gives a thumbs up, saying her partner looks amazing and should have more confidence. Turning his back, the veteran gets the group's attention and indicates it's time for them to start sweeping the area. The trio walks side by side, entering through the main door of a dark and completely abandoned warehouse. Observing the destruction, the boy notices the absurd mess while Hakua tries to figure out where the target might be hiding. Adjusting his glasses, the instructor reveals that teenagers broke into the place for fun and ended up spotting the beast. Suddenly, the three of them freeze in the middle of the warehouse, completely shocked by the grotesque sight ahead. A gigantic green monster appears stretched out on the floor, completely torn apart and covered in a lot of blood. Analyzing the fatal wounds, they realize with horror that the main target has already been eliminated by some mysterious person. Completely lost, the youths wonder if some other agent from the organization had passed through earlier. But the veteran's eyes suddenly widens as he senses an extremely dangerous presence coming right from the ceiling. Desperate, the man screams at the top of his lungs, telling the two rookies to get out of that position immediately. The duo turns their heads at the same time, completely caught off guard by the commander's urgent warning. A brutal bolt of electricity hits the warehouse floor with absurd violence, spreading a shockwave through the air. In the middle of the smoke, a dark, muscular warrior appears, facing the group, leaving Ryudo completely stunned. The terrifying enemy with a skull mask mutters with hatred that humans are evil and need to be annihilated. Without wasting time on talk, the intruder charges swiftly toward the protagonist, prepared to deliver a lethal blow. The threat's closed fist glows intensely, carrying an absurd amount of magical electricity. Showing excellent reflexes, Ryudo leaps, narrowly dodging the punch that blows up the warehouse floor. The young man retreats, panting and impressed, realizing that the enemy can really manipulate destructive lightning. Sliding across the concrete floor, he gains a good distance to better analyze the opponent's movements. Assessing the strange aura, the instructor curses, stating that this creature is not a common aberration from the realm of night. The warrior kneels on the floor, seeming to already recognize the dark and dangerous origin of that mysterious warrior. Completely ignoring the boy, the electric villain dashes at insane speed directly toward Hakua. Realizing the fatal ambush, the veteran bellows his subordinate's name, desperately trying to warn her of the imminent attack. With a firm stomp on the ground, the man takes off, ready to intervene in that cowardly charge. Putting his own body in front, the instructor crosses his arms, blocking the violent impact before it hit the girl. The brutal electric shock pushes the veteran back, making him groan in pain, while the girl calls his name in distress. Overcome by an uncontrollable fury, the young doppelganger draws her blade, asking how he dares to attack her companion. In a brave leap, she charges with her weapon in hand, trying to slice the masked enemy in a super fast counterattack. However, the warrior retaliates by firing a colossal explosion of lightning that mercilessly engulfs the girl in mid-air. Hakua is thrown violently against the ground after taking the electric shock from the enemy. Seeing his friend fall like that, Ryudo screams her name in complete desperation. Faced with that brutal display, the boy is impressed by the opponent's absurd strength. He realizes that the masked warrior is not a common aberration and wonders what the heck it is. Further back, Instructor Rose grumbles, fallen on the ground, warning that his body is still numb from the impact. Suddenly, soft footsteps and a quiet meow completely break the tense atmosphere of the warehouse. The protagonist turns his head instantly, finding the unexpected noise strange. A super cute kitten appears, licking its paw in the middle of the destruction, leaving the boy confused. Without wasting time, the electric villain charges like lightning directly toward the defenseless feline. Terrified by the beast's intention, Raudo tells the monster to stop immediately. The aberration's giant, dark hand approaches with full force to grab the small animal. But the warrior just holds the kitten with extreme delicacy, using both hands. Witnessing this gentle act, the guy freezes on the spot, not understanding anything at all. The scary monster confesses with relief that the feline is safe and promises to protect it from now on. At that, both the boy and the veteran just watch the bizarre scene, completely speechless. Far from that cute moment, Hakua groans in pain trying to get up from the destroyed asphalt. Ryudo runs to help his partner, asking if she's okay, and the girl confirms, somewhat out of breath. Watching the enemy focused on the feline, the young man questions what kind of bizarre creature that is. Intrigued by the situation, he insists on wanting to discover the big guy's true identity. Suddenly, a male voice echoes from above, asking what the heck Yuri is doing. The protagonist immediately looks up, locating the newcomer on the metal catwalk. A mysterious man in a white lab coat and dark glasses watches everyone from above with great arrogance. The boy's mind quickly recalls the warning on the base's large screen to report that dangerous criminal. With that, he tells his partner that he saw that scientist's face on the organization's monitors. Rose gets up from the floor, fully recovered, and points upward, demanding to know who the intruder is. Facing the scientist, the veteran questions what he's planning by snooping around that portal. Showing pure cynicism, the villain in glasses calmly states that all of this is just an experiment. Revolted by the taunt, the instructor repeats the word, indignant at the guy's coldness. The scientist confirms the plan and swears he will drown this rotten world in aberrations to reset everything. Hearing this absurd threat, Hakua feels a sharp pang and lets out a groan of pain. The trauma awakens a memory where a cornered young woman fled desperately from a scary monster. Holding a small blade, the terrified girl pleaded for the creature not to come closer. Faced with the fierce attack, she admitted through her tears that she didn't want to keep fighting anymore. But the aberration launched a brutal energy beam, making the victim scream in pure agony. Engulfed by a destructive flash, the girl ended up being slaughtered without the slightest mercy. In the warrior's dark memory, the scientist watched the entire carnage, isolated behind a glass pane. Returning to reality, Hakua loses control, bellowing while the boy calls out to her. Supporting his trembling companion, Ryudo asks anxiously what's happening to her. Observing the scene, the man in the lab coat recognizes the doppelganger girl with some surprise. However, the villain turns his back, declaring he has no time to waste on Yatagarasu now. This snooty attitude leaves the protagonist quite confused, not understanding the enemy's plan. Complying with the order to leave, the electric warrior confirms the command, holding the kitten in his arms. Without any hurry, the scientist calmly raises his hand, preparing his escape magic. A gigantic, swirling dimensional portal opens, illuminating the entire dark warehouse. Shocked by the massive energy, the trio of agents watches the huge rift appear out of nowhere. From the portal's depths, a scorching energy begins to leak, cracking the floor. A colossal, flaming fist hits the concrete with frightening brutality. Facing that unbearable heat, the boy questions in awe what is coming out of there. An aberration made of incandescent magma rises, roaring and illuminating the environment. Walking to the exit, the villain calmly announces that this monster will be their opponent. Rito stretches out his arm desperately, telling the man in the lab coat to wait right there. But an intense wave of fire forces the boy to retreat, protecting his own face. The lava creature completely blocks the passage, preventing any pursuit of the intruders. Assessing the heat, Rose warns worriedly that the entire building will quickly turn to ashes. The veteran checks his compass, noting they can't banish the monster, so they'll have to take it down there. Summoning his shadow blade, the young man prepares for the fight. Completely frustrated with the situation, the boy's gaze focuses on the threat, remembering the electric warrior who just fled. Analyzing the bizarre auras, he strongly suspects that these enemies did not come from the realm of night. Disappearing through the door, the scientist grumbles that allying with humans is extremely foolish. The villain pets the rescued kitten and advises his lackey to take it easy with this habit of adopting animals. Displaying a snooty posture, the man challenges the agents to defeat his genetically modified aberration. Immediately, the fire beast launches a colossal charge, melting everything in its path. Noticing the massive attack's approach, the group is startled, preparing for the impact. A volcanic explosion engulfs the space where the trio was located seconds ago. Showing good reflexes, Rito leaps far away, firmly gripping his dark scythe. Taking advantage of the momentum in the air, he spins his body, diving with a powerful shadow blow. However, the guy's eyes widen in astonishment as he sees his weapon ricochet off the monster's hard body. Without letting up, the magma giant retaliates with an absurdly fast side punch. The young man uses his darkness to narrowly escape, sliding across the cold industrial floor. Right after, a pillar of flames erupts from the ground, catching the boy by surprise. Being thrown by the force of the heat, the protagonist lets out a scream of agony, falling far away. Rose takes the lead in the battle, telling the rookie to fall back as he will take control of the combat. Hakua questions the veteran, wanting to understand what his suicidal tactic will be now. Activating his magical power, the instructor's hand begins to transform into a furry claw. Now in his imposing werewolf form, the executive tells the students to just watch the show. Rose lets out a fierce cry and throws an absurd punch toward the magma monster. With that, the brutal impact hits the incandescent beast head-on, generating an immense shockwave. Showing all his strength, the veteran focuses his gaze on the battle, maintaining a flawless posture. However, the flaming aberration remains standing, exuding a completely unbearable heat. Lying on the floor, Ryudo is amazed by his master's display of raw power. Regaining his footing, the instructor notes with frustration that this thing is really tough. Just then, the grotesque creature begins to charge a gigantic fireball with its own hands. Without wasting time, the monster fires the flaming attack, causing a frightening explosion. Realizing the gravity of the situation, the werewolf assesses that he can't attack head-on and decides to distract the beast. Using his speed, the veteran runs while the aberration destroys everything with volcanic blasts. The executive warns that he won't be able to protect the rookies now and tells them to survive. Evaluating the fight, the boy notices that their physical strength is matched. But those flames are a problem. Determined to help, he activates his dark magic, wanting to create an opening for his partner to attack. Soon, gigantic hands of darkness charge toward the monster amidst the scorching fire. But the protagonist is quite startled to see his own ability being easily deflected. The creature's infernal heat simply melts the guy's shadow hands in an instant. Completely frustrated, the young man wonders what he should do until his friend calls out to him. The girl approaches, limping, and even though he asks her to retreat, she says she won't just stand by. Showing great courage, Haku extends her hand, offering her magical energy to her partner. Meanwhile, the werewolf continues to leap through the debris to escape the deadly explosions. Observing the enemy's pattern, the veteran is confident he has finally found a good opening, but an absurd blast of flames hits the instructor head-on before he could counterattack. Suddenly, immense shadows invade the scene, surprising the incandescent aberration. Taking advantage of the distraction, the dark arms grab the fire giant with crushing force. Keeping the magic steady, the protagonist screams at the top of his lungs, telling his master to attack without mercy. The executive understands the message perfectly and immediately assumes a combat stance on the asphalt. The darkness grips the volcanic monster, struggling to neutralize its violent movements. Cutting through the wind, the werewolf dashes in a super-fast charge directly at the trapped target. However, the creature's temperature rises drastically, beginning to burn the magical prison. Suffering from the pain, the boy begs the veteran to hurry up, receiving an immediate confirmation. Seeing his ability disappear in the fire, the young man panics, not knowing how to hold the beast. Suddenly, an idea clicks in the guy's mind, making him focus on an extremely risky plan. With great determination, he plants his feet firmly in his own accumulated darkness on the warehouse floor. His partner realizes her colleague's crazy intention and shouts, wanting to understand his plan. Ignoring the warning, the protagonist begins to absorb the violent magic directly into his own body. Watching that scene, the allied duo is completely shocked by the boy's suicidal act. Ryudo decrees that the only way to beat that heat is to swallow the dark energy. Immediately, a dark and chaotic aura explodes around the young man, tearing up the environment. The boy's hand turns into pure darkness, and he realizes he'll lose control if he takes too long. Consumed by the overwhelming power, the rookie lets out a roar of pure fury, facing the aberration. The colossal clash between the absolute shadows and the destructive flames shakes the entire factory. Just then, a gigantic pillar of dark energy pierces the building's roof, tearing through the night. After the brutal attack, the werewolf reverts to human form and runs with the girl through the debris. The two arrive at the smoking crater, while the warrior desperately calls for her companion. The young man appears stretched out face down on the ground, completely exhausted and covered in soot. Seeing that he survived, the warrior sighs in relief, calling the boy crazy for his idea. Right behind, the executive approaches, analyzing the absurd damage caused by his own student. The young woman kneels, asking with a choked voice for her companion to hang on and not pass out. With great effort, the protagonist lets out a low groan and opens his eyes very slowly. Immediately, the instructor holds the guy by the back, helping him sit up safely. Outside, the fire consumes the warehouse, drawing the scared attention of local residents. The veteran announces that the student is awake, and the guy apologizes, still groggy, for the whole mess. Staring at the uncontrollable flames, the young man despairs, saying they need to call for help. Showing calmness, his superior assures him that he has already called for very reliable backup. a mysterious woman arrives on the scene, and the instructor thanks this partner named Miyuki for her presence. This elegant woman is also a powerful executive of the organization, maintaining a serene posture. The boy looks at the newcomer and quickly remembers seeing her around the hideout before. The warrior comments that she commands the ice element, something the master confirms instantly. Clasping his hands, Rose apologizes for the sudden call in an area outside her jurisdiction. The woman just sighs, agreeing, and begins to concentrate strong freezing magic in her hands. Unleashing her power, the executive peacefully announces she will let this favor slide this time. A freezing gust of wind hits the area, making the two rookies huddle, scared by the cold. The absurd power flows through the woman's arm, creating a snowstorm in the middle of the fire. Completely amazed, the boy notices the incredible transformation the veteran has just undergone. The executive assumes the divine form of a snow legend, floating majestically through the night sky. Excited by the scene, Hakwa points to the building, celebrating that the icy plan is working. In the blink of an eye, the destructive flames are completely neutralized by the violent blizzard. Finishing the job perfectly, the powerful mage shows a very gentle and satisfied expression. Later in the Yatagarasu room, the group finishes giving the full report of the incident. Commander Kurosu analyzes the serious information about the portal villain and the unknown beast. Sitting beside him, Rose warns that the scientist has a bizarre aura, part human and part monster. Listening to his master, the protagonist lowers his head, reflecting that he has felt that energy in the past. In the other corner of the table, the young doppelganger remains completely silent, looking at her own hands. Worried by that tense silence, the boy moves closer and quietly asks if she's okay. The warrior gets a huge shock from his approach and quickly plays it cool in the middle of that serious meeting. Apologizing profusely, Hakwa stammers awkwardly, justifying that she just got distracted. Rose thoughtfully comments that the mysterious guy seemed to know the girl very well. At that, the young woman lowers her head, feeling the weight of that uncomfortable revelation. A dark memory of that scientist with a completely macabre air comes to her mind. Analyzing the situation, Kurosu asks if this was the same man who captured her in the past. Completely caught off guard by the direct question, the warrior gives a small start. Hesitating for a moment, she tries to find the right words to begin speaking. Soon, the girl confirms the leader's suspicion and musters the courage to tell the whole truth. The memory goes back to a night in the city where she reports being born directly from the shadows. Walking alone near the tracks, the little girl says she had no idea how to survive. Exploring the empty streets, the girl points out that she had absolutely no one to help her. While rummaging through the trash for scraps, she admits she was completely lost. Sitting in a filthy, dark corner, the little girl reveals that's where she met the man. The young doppelganger looks up, completely exhausted and hungry in that lonely alley. With no other survival options, she confesses that she ended up taking that scientist's hand. The villain made the offer, asking why the little one didn't come live with him. At that moment, the girl felt a lot of hope, believing things would get better. But she ended up trapped and used in terrible experiments that were nothing but pure torture. In the midst of all that constant fear and desperation, the girl finally awakened. Thus, the little doppelganger says she learned to manipulate the power of shadows right there. After that moment, the girl's life was reduced to fighting in completely endless battles. The scientist forced her to combat all types of aberrations while he just watched. Even after being released from confinement, she continued to follow his orders, having no other choice. Back in the present, the warrior sighs heavily, feeling the pain of those memories. She reveals the man's name is Akira Taniguchi, and the giant monster is his brother Yuri. The warrior warns that the villain loved to repeat, that he would drown this rotten world in monsters. Annoyed, Rose notes that this scumbag abused her and has far too dangerous ambitions. Wanting to understand better, Rito asks how his partner managed to escape their clutches. Being very honest, the young woman confesses that the idea of escaping simply never crossed her mind. Hearing this unusual answer, the entire group at the table is perplexed, not understanding the reason. The man used to say that humans were dangerous, and that aberrations needed to annihilate them all. She reports that the brainwashing was heavy, but Ryudo asks what changed her mind. Showing great affection, the girl replies that everything changed because she met someone. In the past, the little warrior was completely thrown aside and exhausted in an alley at dusk. Suddenly, a calm and friendly voice gets the attention of the girl lying on the dirt ground. A blonde human boy appears, asking with great concern if she was okay. The young man kneels close to the little girl, trying to gently offer some help. Startled by the contact, she quickly jumps back, taking the boy by surprise. Being very agile, the girl lands far away, assuming a completely defensive posture. Trying to defuse the situation, the boy raises his hands, asking her not to be scared. The memory of Akira saying that humans are savage echoes strongly in the girl's mind. Influenced by the lie, she activates her shadow power, scaring the innocent human. The young blonde boy freezes, not understanding what kind of strange magic was happening there. The little girl sees the boy only as an enemy that needs to be eliminated immediately. Completely consumed by the brainwashing, she prepares to make the lethal pounce. With a swift move, the little girl charges furiously while the boy cowers in fear. But the girl's body reaches its limit, and she ends up fainting before completing the attack. The human opens one eye, noticing that the fatal blow simply didn't happen. Staring at the fainted young woman, he grumbles, trying to understand what this kid's problem is. Later that night, the scene changes to the inside of an abandoned bus in a junkyard. The little girl rests peacefully, lying on the dusty seats of the old vehicle. The guy appears, holding a convenience store bag, and notices that she has finally woken up. Startled by his approach, the young woman jumps up, going on high alert again. Very calmly, the boy extends a bottle of water, assuring her he won't hurt her. The little girl stares at the offered water, feeling very suspicious of this sudden kindness. Crouching in the aisle, the guy asks if she's hungry and says he brought a snack. At that very moment, the girl's stomach rumbles super loudly, giving the game away completely. The human extends a sweet bread and carefully asks if her injuries still hurt. Completely lost in the situation, the doppelganger looks at the snack without any reaction. Breaking the silence, the little girl quietly asks why he is helping her. Greatly relieved, the boy celebrates the fact that the girl finally said something. Filled with guilt, she remembers that she tried to attack and finish him off moments before in the dark alley. The guy admits he was pretty scared and asks what kind of creature she really is. Being very sincere, the little warrior confesses with her head down that she is not human. In the following days, the young man continued to take care of her and bring food to that hideout. The boy prepared a hot snack for both of them, heating water over a fire outside. Excited, he enters the bus, announcing that the instant noodles were ready. As they eat together, the little girl says she belongs to a race called doppelganger. Impressed, the boy thinks it's amazing that there's a human in the world exactly like her. The girl reports that the time spent with him made all that fear and hatred of humans disappear. With a gentle look, the guy assures her he doesn't care about her race and asks her not to be afraid. Hearing such pure words leaves the little girl completely amazed and very emotional. Soon the human gets up to leave, and she hastily asks where he is going. Walking to the exit, he says he's moving the next day and won't be able to come back. The news of his departure hits the little girl hard, leaving the warrior very depressed. Saying goodbye with a gentle smile, the boy tells Hakua to take care. Just then, the young warrior realizes that he left very suddenly. Still inside the abandoned bus, she is startled to notice a black notebook on the seat. Quickly, the girl gets up and goes to the door, holding the object, trying to call him. A memory shows the boy handing her that notebook, thinking it would be useful. Standing outside, she makes a promise to never go back to the lab or betray anyone again. Free from scientist Akira's brainwashing, the young woman acts on her own for the first time. Soon, she begins to walk through the city and ends up finding a recruitment poster on the street. Following the lead, the girl opens the door of a bar, catching everyone's attention inside. Facing the men at the counter, the little doppelganger remains completely silent. Confused, leader Kurosu questions her presence, but the girl just watches him firmly. Sitting at the counter next to him, she listens intently about the Yatagarasu group. Determined to change who she was in the past, she moves forward with firm steps, wanting to pay her debt. The girl swears to repay everything that kind boy did for her in the future. Thus, Hakua grows up and reveals that she officially joined the secret organization. Back in the present, the group processes the revelation in the meeting room. Instructor Rose questions who exactly this scientist is that kept her captive. The girl states that the man's goal is to destroy their world using aberrations. She reports that the villain has a deep hatred for humans, and Kurosu suspects something. Paying attention, Ryudo realizes with horror that the enemy is a true monster. The image of the carnage with monsters invading the city once again haunts the rookie. Very tense, the boy concludes that it was the scientist who caused that disaster in the future. Leader Kurosu narrows his eyes, assuring them he has heard of this Akira before. This sudden revelation surprises Hakua and Ryudo immediately. Maintaining his serious posture, the vampire explains that the villain worked at a research institute. Executive Rose remembers that this group studied aberrations in secret behind the scenes. Hearing about research with monsters leaves the protagonist completely shocked. The commander says the facility was shut down but reveals that humans were also taking action. At the table, he concludes that humans created this research body to face the creatures. A clean, empty laboratory corridor appears, showing where all this took place. In the past, scientist Akira visits his own younger brother in a hospital room. Young Yuri thanks him for his presence with a very weak voice and apologizes for the trouble. With a gentle smile, the patient shows gratitude for his older brother's company. However, a dark monster breaks the glass, screaming the boy's name in the empty room. The scientist's eyes widen, overcome by deep shock and uncontrollable fury. Alone in the darkness, the man breathes heavily, suffering from the terrible loss. Sitting on the edge of the bed, he refuses to accept his brother's demise and mutters in agony. An old photo shows the two of them happy and hugging, marking the pain of that tragedy. Obsessed, the scientist works in a dirty lab while the monster Yuri plays in the corner. The large aberration watches a small kitten with great curiosity and affection. The feline lifts its paws, playing happily with a fluffy toy. Analyzing the scene, Akira finds the monster's amusement with the pet strange. With a slight smile, the villain suggests that his giant brother give the new friend a name. As the scientist turns his back, the creature holds the cat, trying to think of something nice. Focused on his dark research, the man walks down a dark, silent corridor. Back in the present, the villain notes that the agents destroyed his magma monster, but he faces a new aberration trapped in a tube and says that the losses don't matter. The scary green creature thrashes furiously inside the tank of magic liquid. Adjusting his glasses, the scientist maliciously decrees that the end of this world is near. Meanwhile, the sunset peacefully illuminates the buildings of the big city. At the school, Ryudo runs through the corridors, looking at the coordinates of the next mission on his cell phone. In a great hurry, the protagonist flees the classroom, wanting to avoid his friends. Suddenly, Ren shouts for him to wait, forcing the guy to stop abruptly. The blonde guy and Racuna face the boy, asking the reason for his constant rush every day. Sweating nervously, the young man invents another lame excuse about a video game event. He starts running desperately again, promising to explain everything to the duo the next day. Watching his escape, the girl grumbles sadly that her friend has been ignoring them frequently. Just then, the young woman turns her face, drawing her colleague's attention to an old conversation. Confused, the blonde guy asks what exactly she's talking about, and the girl mentions the hospital. A memory of the guy walking home emerges, asking if the girl knows about aberrations. In the recollection, his colleague reveals that he saved a monster girl when he was a child. Hearing that crazy confession leaves his friend completely paralyzed with surprise. In the present, the girl demands to know the whole story and accuses the two of hiding the truth. Pressured, the blonde guy raises his hands, stammering and trying to hide his nervousness. Very annoyed, the girl exclaims that she feels completely excluded by the two guys. Ren panics, trying to calm his colleague down and assuring her that's not it at all. Losing her patience, Racuna turns her back, determined to uncover the secret on her own. She runs off furiously down the school hallway, ignoring the blonde guy's desperate calls. Alone in the hall, the guy lowers his hand, sighing in frustration for having annoyed his friend. Later, the protagonist waits in a dark alley, calmly checking his cell phone. The rookie finds Instructor Rose's delay strange, but confirms he is in the correct area. Suddenly, a male scream of terror rips through the silence, scaring the boy instantly. Without wasting time, he dashes swiftly down the street, trying to locate the source of the desperation. On the alley floor, a man cries for help while being attacked by a mummified aberration. Ryuto freezes, completely shocked to recognize the enemy from previous battles. On the street, Ryuto runs up and tells the mummified monster to stop the attack. Recognizing the boy, the beast backs away while the civilian pleads for help against the creature. Just then, a band of blue monsters appears, and the mummy complains that they want to devour it. The protagonist's eyes widen as he realizes the size of the new threat in that alley. The dark creatures advance slowly in a group, ready to attack anyone. Taking advantage of the distraction, the mummy cowardly flees, announcing it will leave the rest to the guy. Alone in the area, the boy curses in frustration, seeing the horde completely surround the area. He soon realizes that these bizarre monsters came directly from the realm of night. Adopting a firm stance, the young man's gaze shows total determination for the fight. Without hesitation, he invokes the transposition magic in the middle of the street to banish the enemies. Enraged, the aberrations let out a threatening roar against the isolated rookie. Quickly, the protagonist unleashes his powerful dark energy through his own hand. With a swift attack, the dark blade slices through several creatures at once in a brutal blow. One of the monsters tries to escape by running, but the guy decrees that it will not get away. Suddenly, the fleeing aberration is cut from behind by a lethal surprise attack. Finishing the move, Ryudo shreds the nearest enemy, sending blood everywhere. Out of the corner of his eye, he notices the other creature being eliminated at the far end of the street. The boy turns his face, very surprised, wanting to understand who delivered that blow. Leaping from the rooftops, Haku arrives on the battlefield, landing directly on the monsters. Demonstrating great agility, the warrior slices the blue beast without the slightest difficulty. Greatly relieved by the backup, the protagonist immediately calls his companion's name, thanking her for the help. He hears the young woman ask him not to let his guard down for a moment. Worried, the guy asks if his friend is really okay to fight like that already. Maintaining her calm, the doppelganger assures him she is fully recovered. She smiles, commenting that they fight better together, and her colleague agrees instantly. Far away, Rakuna walks alone down an alley illuminated by the orange sunset. Observing the place, the girl recognizes the street and confirms that was the exact spot. A memory emerges, showing when she found little Rudo abandoned there in the past. Connecting the dots, the young woman concludes with certainty that the story about the game event was a lie. Wandering through the lost area, she wonders where her friend has gone and what he's up to. Suddenly, Rakuna hears a faint meow and wonders if there's a kitten nearby. The little tabby animal appears, meowing very gently to the surprised girl. Being very affectionate, the feline rubs against her legs, asking for some attention. The girl kneels down, sweetly asking what happened and if it got lost. Noticing the collar on the animal's neck, she realizes the little cat already has an owner. Without any warning, the animal runs off down the alley, and the young woman tries to call it back. Worried, the girl decides to follow the little animal through the narrow streets, asking it to wait. Losing sight of her target, she stops in the middle of the dark alley, looking for the hasty fugitive. Suddenly, a very violent sound of an attack startles the student. Looking toward the corner, Rakuna tries to understand where that brutal sound came from. The girl's eyes widen, completely horrified by the bizarre scene just ahead. Instructor Rose cuts a grotesque aberration in half, sending blood all over the street walls. Annoyed with the mission, the veteran grumbles that he has no time to waste on those beasts. Looking at his cell phone, the executive sees a message confirming that Hakua has found the boy. Hiding in the shadows, the young woman covers her mouth in terror, not knowing what kind of monster that is. Later, Ryudo checks his phone, relieved to know that his master has finished the job. Walking beside him, the warrior suggests they eat together since the work is done. Excited by the unexpected invitation, the guy smiles and agrees that the idea is really great. Strolling through the neighborhood, the young woman tries to decide what she wants to eat while he accompanies her. Now inside a rustic restaurant, the boy is shocked that such a place exists in the lost area. Hakua points out that the owner of the place is a giant pigeon, leaving her partner in complete disbelief. Sitting at the table, the girl takes a huge bite of her pizza slice with great gusto. With an excited smile, she praises the perfect combination of melted cheese and hot crust. Noticing her colleague's fixed gaze, the young woman hesitates a bit and asks if she said something strange. The boy confesses that he just didn't expect to see his partner eating such a normal dish. He then curiously asks if she really likes cheese that much. Happily confirming, she hears the guy comment that Rakuna also loves to eat it. Upon hearing about her human friend, the warrior shows a melancholic smile from under her mask. Breaking the silence, Ryudo asks why she doesn't take off her blindfold, even when eating, but the protagonist immediately regrets it and hastily apologizes for the invasive question. The boy reflects that aberrations hide their physical features to live in the human world. But since doppelgangers already look human, he questions the necessity of the disguise on her face. Facing his partner, he suggests she wears the mask to hide from scientist Akira. Hakua confirms the theory, but seriously warns that this is not the only reason for the blindfold. She reveals that the fatal curse activates when the clones find their long, lost original humans. Explaining further, the warrior says the effect begins as soon as one recognizes the other's face. Therefore, the young woman covers her eyes, wanting to reduce the chances of harming her human version. Pointing to the fabric on her face, she declares that the mask is also a symbol of her duty as an agent. Clenching her fist firmly, the girl promises to protect people to pay the debt to the one who saved her in the past. Ryudo listens to his companion's words, feeling enormous admiration for the young woman's nobility. Watching his partner drink in peace, he internally decides that he will never hide his own secrets from her. Meanwhile, Rakuna remains hidden in the street, paralyzed by the sight of that brutal massacre on the corner. Suddenly, Instructor Rose turns his head very suspiciously, detecting a nearby presence in the shadows. Pointing directly into the alley, the executive announces that he has already noticed the spy and tells the person to come out immediately. The girl gasps, completely terrified, as she realizes that the dangerous man has discovered her hiding spot. Stepping out of her hiding spot, Raccoona appears, sweating nervously and apologizing profusely, assuring him she wasn't trying to snoop around. Instructor Rose looks at her from the corner of his eye, assessing the girl, and calmly notes that she is just an ordinary human. As he turns his body, the veteran warns that this alley is not a safe place to be wandering and tells the girl to go straight home. The executive then turns his back and starts to walk away, while the young woman hesitates, trying to get his attention. Completely confused by the whole bizarre situation, the student musters her courage and questions who exactly that man is. With his steps halted, Rose warns in a very serious tone that curiosity has its limits and that crossing this line could be fatal. Displaying a threatening predator's gaze, the veteran completes the sentence, assuring her that investigating too much will only lead the girl to her demise. Faced with this direct threat, Raccoona is completely paralyzed with fear, unable to say another word. But her stubbornness wins out, and the young woman starts running down the dark alley, begging the mysterious man to wait a moment. As soon as she reaches the empty corner, the student stops, panting, and realizes with complete frustration that the man has vanished. Very tired, the girl lowers her head, deeply regretting that she couldn't find out almost anything about her friend's disappearance. Clutching her own skirt tightly, she refuses to give up and tries to piece together the few parts of this bizarre puzzle. The image of Ryudo comes to mind, confirming that aberrations really exist and that her classmate certainly knows the whole truth. With that, she concludes that both her friend and that dangerous man are hiding a huge secret. Just as Amio breaks the silence, with a lighter mood, the young woman kneels down very gently, recognizing the same tabby kitten that had run off moments before. Gently, the student smiles, offering a treat in her hand, wanting to know if the little feline is very hungry. Distracted, looking for food in her bag, the girl doesn't even notice a monstrous shadow being cast right behind her. A colossal aberration silently emerges right behind the girl, stating in a deep voice that it has finally found her. Raccoona quickly freezes, feeling the threatening presence, and turns her face, completely terrified by the enemy. Very close to its prey, the grotesque creature lets out a grunt of confusion. Noticing something unexpected about the cornered target, the monster hesitates for a moment, getting a better look at the girl's face, and tries to confirm a very bizarre suspicion.